silent witnesses of past glory, golden cups gathering dust on the shelf. Nearby, on the wall, medals are hung, each of which is an echo of victories and hard work. In the center of one of the photographs, a young Namgyo shines, her smile seeming like the brightest star in the sports firmament. But now she sleeps in her cramped room, where the morning light only timidly penetrates through the blinds. Her face is relaxed, but even in sleep one can feel a slight shadow of fatigue, the imprint of what she has experienced. Suddenly, her eyelids flutter, and a vague, almost inaudible sigh escapes. And now she is no longer in her bed, but in the middle of a noisy city street, where buildings stretch upwards and passers-by merge into indistinguishable silhouettes. Someone's hand suddenly grabs her, and an insistent voice demands that she listen. The world around her seems to freeze, and pure, painful amazement is reflected in her eyes. Then Cha Gul coldly asks, "When will you finally disappear?" He looks down and, as if startled, notices, "You're crying." Tears stream down her cheeks, and a cry of despair erupts from the depths of her soul. Namgyo asks her to leave, but Cha Gyul hugs her, begging her not to cry and expressing his regret. She accuses him of hurting her first and now feigning concern, to which he only sighs hoarsely. The world around them fades into darkness, leaving only the two of them at the center of this unbearable drama. "How can you just change everything so easily?" Her voice breaks with rage and despair. His hand reaches out to her, as if trying to hold on to the fleeting moment, and he hugs her tightly, a gesture that mixes pain, remorse, and, perhaps, his last hope. Through her hair he whispers, "It's still hard for me, Namgyo," confessing his own unhealed wound. His eyes, full of sorrow, reflect the full weight of their shared history. But he pulls away, hiding something valuable but bitter deep in his pocket. "I'm sorry," he whispers silently, pulling the medal out from the depths. That same Olympic medal, a symbol of triumph and the unbearable burden of the past. But suddenly, a sharp jerk of consciousness pulls us out of this scene, throwing us into the chaos of Namgyo's nightmare. She wakes up in a cold sweat, a scream frozen in her throat, her eyes wide open to the morning darkness. The city wakes up, filling the streets with a familiar noise, but in Namgyo's soul the echo of the night's shadows lingers for a long time. April, the month of hope and new beginnings, finds her on a half-empty bus. Her gaze is glassy and empty, directed towards the window, hiding behind it the abyss of an internal struggle. Memories of the upcoming competition, which could have been her ticket to the national team, are painfully sharp. Every movement of the bus is followed by a dull, aching pain in the crippled leg, securely locked in the brace. "It's all because of that child, Nam Seo," she whispers to herself, and the soft clatter of the bus brings her back to the origins of the trauma. The memory flares up like a bright flame, furious screams, words full of hatred thrown at the teenager. "You seriously want me to die? You think I won't do it?" echoes the desperate question, full of youthful pain. And now she, seized with horror, sees him, her younger brother, on the very edge of the abyss. "Nam Seo," her cry pierces the air as she rushes towards him one last time, trying to save him. A desperate attempt, the last moments when she could still hold him, clinging to elusive hope. But gravity is merciless, and the two figures fall down into an endless abyss of despair. And now, after some time, in her thoughts, there is only a bitter realization, and also this idiot, my little brother. If only I could go to the Olympics and become famous enough, then my family could live in comfort, she dreams with unbearable melancholy. But to make a living as I am now, the thought breaks off, leaving only a sharp pain and unspoken regrets in the soul. Why is it my fault that she won't go to the competition? Moon Gi-sun flares up, and there is not a drop of gratitude in his words for saving her. I should have let him die. An angry thought flashes through Namgyo's head, but it quickly fades. After all, as the eldest daughter, she could not help but intervene, even if it cost her her own future. The announcement of the next stop, high school, breaks Namgyo out of his heavy thoughts and brings him back to reality. It was 7 o'clock and 2 minutes past 7. The morning was already in full swing, but for her it had started too early. A school uniform flashes outside the window, the same one she's wearing, which causes slight surprise. Someone is rushing, begging the driver to stop, and Namgyo thinks longingly about his lost abilities. Her gaze catches the silhouette frozen in the doorway, and in it she recognizes something painfully familiar. Stylish sneakers confidently step along the bus floor, approaching her seat. The young man adjusts the tie on his school uniform with casual grace. It's Chagyul. His face is slightly worried, but his piercing gaze remains the same. Their eyes meet for a moment, and the air between them seems to become electric. Then he smiles slightly, and a quiet "hello" falls from his lips, breaking the silence. Hello? Namgyo asks, puzzled, trying to understand the reason for such unexpected politeness. He sits down, and she continues to look at him, trying to figure out this meeting. But Che Gyul only extends his hand, intending to open the window, creating a slight draft. Oh, he just opened the window, she realizes, and the tension eases. Fresh morning air rushes into the cabin, bringing with it a light breath of freedom. Along with it, a subtle but distinct scent of soap reaches her nose, clean and fresh. A sudden spasm pierces her stomach, reminding her of the body that had so cruelly failed her. Namgo sits on the bus, lost in her thoughts, but her gaze keeps sliding towards the CHA sitting opposite her, GEL. Calm down, just calm down, she whispers to herself, trying to calm the growing excitement and sudden impulse inside her. She clenches her palms tightly, trying not to give herself away, because laughing now would mean completely losing her composure. But a sly smile still breaks through on her face, and she has to try her best to restrain herself from inappropriate laughter. Unexpectedly, CHAGEL turns his head and a small, questioning sound escapes his lips. NAMGO freezes, and CHAGL utters one single word that makes your blood run cold, hiccups. Shame burns her cheeks and she lowers her eyes, feeling caught red-handed in the most awkward situation. Did he hear me giggle? The panicked thought flashed through her head, echoing. CHAGL looks at her, and a barely audible but so capacious word puppy flies from his lips. Her heart begins to pound wildly, and her cheeks flush bright red with embarrassment and surprise. Meanwhile, on the face of CHAGL flashes a light, barely noticeable smile, full of hidden subtext. Namgio feels like the whole world is collapsing around him, and CHAGL already turns away, exhaling calmly. He called me a pervert. I should have answered him. Indignation battles with confusion in her soul. She looks at her leg in plaster and realizes that any explanation about a puppy would sound absurd. For a moment, she feels like she's going crazy from this whole awkward and rapidly developing situation. She clasps her hands tightly on her knees, trying to pull herself together and calm the storm of emotions. Her heart is pounding like crazy as she covers her mouth, trying to hold back the rush of emotions. The scene changes, and now several people are running around the stadium, and among them is the familiar figure of Namgio. Moon Gaison, easily overtaking the others, teases her, offering to run on her hands since nothing is impossible for her. Namgio gives him a sweet smile, but there's only one thought in her eyes. Maybe I should kill them all? Namgio, leaning on crutches, calls out to someone with undisguised irritation. It's Moon Gi-sung, who asks with a gentle smile if she's just arrived, suggesting that they finish their run together. Sichagel, passing by, seems not to notice her condition and demands that she wait, ordering her to get him water from her bag. He's always in charge, Namgio thought, watching Chagl's retreating back. She sighs heavily, trying to suppress the growing irritation from Chagel. Chagel disappears into the distance, leaving Namgio alone with his thoughts at the entrance to the stadium. Moon Gi-sung approaches her, asking with concern about the forced break in training. Namgio explains the doctor strictly forbade her from any kind of physical activity, and even the suggestion of training in the hospital resulted in a severe reprimand. Moon Gi-soon asks about the recovery time, and Namgio hands him his bottle and offers him a sip. While Moon Gi-sung drinks, she mentally reproaches him and then playfully scolds him, "Don't stick your dirty mouth on her like that." Moon Gi-soon, meanwhile, explains to Namgio that an injury to one leg will inevitably lead to weakening of the rest of the muscles. With bitterness in his eyes, Namgio agrees, understanding the gravity of the situation. Moon Gi-soon looks down, realizing how painful these words are for her. Namgio, having fallen to the ground, desperately tries to brush away the dark thoughts, but her subconscious strangely stubbornly returns to Moon Gi-sung. Chagel, with an inscrutable expression on his face, watches them from afar, clutching his bottle in his hand. A heavy melancholy envelopes Namgio, plunging her into the abyss of hopelessness. Chagel takes a sip from his bottle, his gaze sharp and critical. He comes closer, immediately reproaching Namgio. "Why did you even come here in a cast, huh? You should have stayed at home and rested." "You're ruining everyone's mood," continues Chagel. "You won't make it to the competition this year anyway." And even her friend, looking at Namgio with pain, reminds her of her unfulfilled dreams of a national team and the Olympics, which now seem so distant. Chagl's words sound sharp, calling for silence. But Moon Gi-sung, turning to Cha Gyul, tries to remind him of his own words, about the importance of taking care of yourself. Chagel doesn't let him finish, but only says dryly, "Enough." And Namgyo doesn't seem to be giving up at all, boldly declaring that even with her injury, she's faster. Her friend, seeing this bravado, only sneers contemptuously, pointing out Namgyo's pathetic attempts to stay in shape. With a sly smile, she reveals the secret that the coach is using her and her friends' fights as training material for Namgyo. And he finishes off Namgyo by declaring that no matter how much she watches, she will never reach that level. Shame and pain pierce Namgyo, her face flushing with humiliation. Chagel only lets out a short "sheh" and silently walks away, leaving them behind. Moon Gi-sung tries to encourage Namgyo by reminding her of the importance of taking care of her body, but he sounds hesitant. The friend, looking away, justifies herself by saying that her harsh words about Namgyo's injury were said in anger when she was simply fed up with her. The friend, pulling her hand away, again warns Namgyo that her sharp tongue will one day play a cruel joke on her. Namgyo seems to lose his patience and grabs Chaejeol's hand, calling him an idiot for not caring. But Chagel doesn't pay attention, only coldly orders her to go apologize to Unsu. And he turns away again, finally telling her to wash her hands until they squeak, as if she had defiled him with her touch. Suddenly, someone grabs Chagel by the ear, forcing him to stop and turn around. Meanwhile, the class begins to take roll call, and the teacher calls out the next name, Namgyo. However, her seat is empty, and the teacher, slightly puzzled, repeats the question. Her friend stands up, announcing Namgyo's absence and wondering if she's stuck at practice. Another student quickly raises his hand and tells the bitter truth. Namgyo is in the infirmary. Upon hearing the news, Namgyo's friend casts a piercing glance at the woman with whom the wounded woman had a recent altercation. Did your squabble really cost her her health? Her words sound like an accusation, but the injured student only looks away. She tries to justify herself by saying that Namgyo herself is careless with her words, but her excuses sound unconvincing. "Hey, Moon Gi-sung!" The friend abruptly turns her angry gaze to the guy standing nearby, a silent witness until now. Moon Gi-sung, trying to defend Namgyo, only hears in response that he, not knowing the intricacies of judo, cannot understand their fierce rivalry. "There's no need to defend her," my friend says with a hint of bitterness, her eyes full of long, simmering resentment. "She's a genius," she admits hoarsely, but then adds with despair, "We could be a team, sharing the joy of victory. But she doesn't need us. Every man for himself, that's what she thinks." Her voice breaks off, leaving a taste of dashed hopes in the air. At this moment, somewhere far away, Namgyo is experiencing her pain, images of her former strength flickering in her mind. The flawless strike, the energy, the speed, everything that once defined her now seems like an unattainable past. Reality hits harder than any enemy. Here she is, slowly and with difficulty descending the stairs, leaning on crutches. It is symbolic how the crutches float away from her into the dark abyss, and Namgyo herself plunges into despair. The dull sound of her crutches hitting the steps echoes in her soul, each step a painful reminder of her weakness. "Oh, I'm so tired of hopping on one leg," she whispers, her face distorted with pain and fatigue. While she limps, others, like predators, will catch up and overtake, leaving her far behind. The words of her rival, once thrown out in the heat of an argument, now sound like a prophecy, and Namgyo can hardly hold back her tears. She recalls proudly declaring, "A Korean eldest daughter never loses," but it sounds like a bitter mockery of her current situation. Meanwhile, Cha-gyul, with a bleeding lip but an unperturbed expression, sarcastically comments on the failure of one of his plans. His hand unexpectedly lands on her back, helping her sit up, a gesture she didn't expect from such a man, but one she can't refuse. Cha-gyul's offer of help sounds unusually soft, and Namgyo, although surprised, accepts his concern, finally finding support. Namgyo tries to match his face with the one that pops up in her memory and recognizes him as a random fellow traveler. There is bewilderment in her eyes, because she cannot believe that this cold guy could show any attention to her. Her thoughts race between irritation and trying to remember, did he really forget, or was he just teasing her? Namgyo says his name to herself, trying to comprehend that she now knows the name of this mysterious stranger. Chae-gyul looks at her with a slight smirk, claiming that her curiosity was too obvious. Namgyo, flushed, tries to object, but her reaction only confirms his words. He just smiles mysteriously, as if anticipating her thoughts and knowing more about her than he seems. Under his intense gaze and playful laughter, Namgyo feels uneasy. Cha-gyul looks up, his smile widening, hinting at something else to come. Namgyo blushes, realizing that all her attempts to save face have been shattered. With casual confidence, he confirms that he was right and that she was caught red-handed. The next question about her name removes the last barriers, and Nam Geo identifies herself, acknowledging this unexpected moment of familiarity. He looks straight ahead, his gaze penetrating deeply, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. But the narrative is interrupted, and words appear on the screen addressed no longer to the heroes, but to us, those who follow their destinies. We then move on to another location, the bustle of an office, where Moon Gi-sung reports on recent health-related developments. Nam Geo, with her leg bandaged, listens to his concerned question about her brother, who seems to be facing serious difficulties. The scene changes to a hospital room where Nam Geo's brother, with his arm in a cast, groans in pain as she tries to calm him down. Moon Gi-sung, rubbing his temples with concern, suggests that Nam Geo return to the dorm, apparently wanting to ease her burden. But Nam Geo reminds her that financial difficulties prevent her from doing so, leaving Moon Gi-sung at a loss. He, trying to calm both her and himself, insistently asks her not to be nervous, although he himself looks extremely agitated. And so she sits there, like a guilty schoolgirl, listening to instructions about the need to rest, although it seems to her that this is simply impossible. But after all the words, she only smiles softly, agreeing, although deep fatigue can be seen in her eyes. The sudden question about the missed lesson catches her off guard, and Nam Geo can't hide her embarrassment. And Moon Gi-sung, watching her, only smiles his usual, slightly ironic smile, as if he knows more than he says. Their eyes meet, and the tension between them grows, making Nam Geo even more embarrassed. Her cheeks flush, and she looks away, trying to hide her true emotions. This unexpected surge of feelings gives her away completely, leaving a bright mark of embarrassment on her face. Later, Moon Gi-sung leans against the wall with his eyes closed, as if seeking a moment of peace in this hectic day. Nam Geo, noticing his tiredness, asks with slight concern if he wants to sleep. She watches him, seeing his peaceful but perhaps only apparent peace. Moon Gi-sung remains motionless, his profile expressing weariness and a certain thoughtfulness. But just one slightly opened eye reveals that he is not sleeping at all, attentively catching every movement around him. And so, he slowly opens his eyes, giving Nam Geo a soft, reassuring smile, as if to say, "I'm here, I hear you." Back in the office, she listens to Cha Gyul's stern but caring instructions on recovery, feeling her emotions wash over her. Her hands clench tightly, and she forces out a quiet, "Yes," acknowledging the obvious. Chejel insistently repeats, recovery is the most important thing, and she cannot compete yet. Grateful for his understanding and support, Nam Geo leaves the office on crutches, accompanied by his quiet go, and the training hall is bustling with life. Young athletes are diligently honing their skills, their energy filling the entire space. Among them, Moon Gi-sung, drenched in sweat, trains with redoubled intensity, trying to drown out his worries about Nam Geo. And so, after some time, Nam Geo slowly limps, leaning on crutches, and someone's voice, full of surprise, calls out to her, "Nam Geo?" Nam Geo looks up, quietly acknowledging her presence, her face slightly distorted with surprise. While Moon Gi-sung, drenched in sweat, pauses his workout thinking about the appearance of this idiot, Cha Gyul remarks that he hasn't even broken a sweat yet. Limping and leaning on crutches, Nam Geo stands, her gaze slightly confused. Moon Gi-sung, leaving the gym, asks Nam Geo in amazement what she is doing there, to which she only yelps awkwardly. Moon Gi-sung, trying to contain his surprise, explains to her that they are not being worked so hard today. Nam Geo explains that she came to see the coach to show herself and discuss something important. Moon Gi-sung asks about the coach's verdict, and Nam Geo, with a slight sadness, conveys the recommendation to rest. Their gazes meet, then Nam Geo looks away, as if lost in thought. Deep down, Nam Geo is seething at the thought that she still has to look after this child, because he could have walked to the hospital on his own. Suddenly, Nam Geo remembers something she hadn't had a chance to share, and Moon Gi-sung immediately asks what it was. She indignantly talks about Nam Seo's bleached hair, which now shines from afar like a yellow nightmare, while Moon Gi-sung, on the contrary, thinks that it suits him and even looks cute. Nam Geo blushes, silently noting that it is possible to look cute without any coloring, and the image of Moon Gi-sung with a piercing flashes before her mind's eye. She hesitantly adds that piercings can sometimes look quite appropriate, and Moon Gi-sung remains silent, not knowing how to respond to this unexpected stream of thoughts. Suddenly, Moon Gi-sung glances quickly to the side, and Nam Geo immediately asks what has him so worried. He dismisses it absent-mindedly, saying it just seemed like someone walked by, but Nam Geo doesn't stop trying to figure out who it could have been. But Moon Gi-sung interrupts the conversation, says that he needs to step away for a short time, and, telling her to go ahead, quickly leaves, leaving Namgyo perplexed. Left alone, Namgyo looks after him in bewilderment, trying to understand the reason for his hasty departure. Her thoughts are confused. Who did he see there that he ran away so quickly, without even bothering to explain his behavior? Meanwhile, Moon Gi-sung, with sweat beading on his forehead, hurries away, his face betraying the tension within him. And now he is standing at the window, his gaze directed into the distance, and his thoughts seem to be wandering somewhere far away. Moon Gi-sung remembers the day he, Cha-gul, and another boy were rushing down the street, supporting their beaten friend. Then anxiety for the wounded man gripped everyone, and the unknown man in the hood seemed like a shadow enveloping their path. He thought the atmosphere was too tense at the time and didn't want Namgyo, his friend, to worry unnecessarily. Jae-jel, as if reading his thoughts, only silently lowers his gaze, a whole story hidden in his eyes. His inner voice whispers that he always does what he thinks is right, because caring for Namgyo has long become an unspoken habit for him. Meanwhile, Moon Gi-sung's memories lead him to one place, an abandoned alley where they were rushing to back then, and he is overcome by a vague premonition. It turned out to be a narrow passage between buildings, where a group of guys had gathered surrounding someone who was squatting in confusion. Suddenly, Chae-gyul appears in the hallway in a judo uniform, causing one of the boys to exclaim in displeasure, "Damn, you scared us so much. I thought it was the teacher." One of them, a guy in a leopard jacket, asks with a grin, "That's Cha-gyul, right? How do you know him?" He points to Cha-gyul's ear and cynically declares, "He's a judoka. Look at his ears, they look just like dumplings." Chae-gyul, unperturbed and serious, only sternly says, "Come here." The guy in the leopard jacket, clearly surprised, says the name with bewilderment, as if trying to understand who is being talked about. Another one, wearing a hoodie, points at Cha-gel, clarifying, "The one with Gel now." And the guy in the jacket nods understandingly. The camera pans down to reveal two boys. One appears to be smoking, the other leaning on him, his figure contorted in pain. The gaze falls on Moon Gi-sung, his face pale and his arm in a sling. He is scared, and the one holding him asks, "This one?" The guy in the leopard jacket, squatting down, smiles slyly, turning to Moon Gi-sung. "Why are you shaking, poor thing? So you are the one." Moon Gi-sung cowers, his eyes full of fear as the smoke from his e-cigarette enveloped his pale face. Jae-jel, standing at a distance, makes a soft sound, full of disappointment and disgust at what is happening. The guy in a leopard jacket pulls Moon Gi-sung towards him, his gaze sliding over her frightened face, an electronic cigarette clutched in his hand. And he, mockingly raising an eyebrow, asks Moon Gi-sung, "Why are you so gloomy? What's wrong with your face?" But his place is immediately taken by another guy, pulling Moon Gi-sung towards him with a sly grin. At that moment, Ja-gyul appears, his calm only underscoring the mounting tension. "So," he begins, his voice low. The main bully, now holding Moon Gi-sung, looks mockingly at the frightened boy, as if he were his prey. The guy with the piercing asks Moon Gi-sung, "Do you know him?" Moon Gi-sung, trembling, barely audibly squeezes out, "Yee-ee-ee-oh," unable to raise his eyes. Ja-gyul, like a statue, watches everything without saying a word, his gaze piercing through everything. The bully, catching this look, only hums mysteriously, his smile growing even wider. The guy in the leopard jacket, like a detached observer, takes out a cigarette and, waving his hand, says, "Oh, okay. Let's go." His friend snaps impatiently, but the bully only asks in confusion, "Huh? What? Where are we going?" He takes a deep drag and clouds of smoke curl around his face, betraying his complete composure. He turns back to Cha-gyul, challenging him in his eyes, while still holding Moon Gi-sung. He mockingly holds out an e-cigarette, asking, "I'm supposed to accompany them, aren't I?" And so they set off, the bully still holding Moon Gi-sung back, and Cha-gyul, who seemed determined to go with them. A friend in a leopard jacket squats down and cackles, "What a bastard, haha." "Well, give them a proper send-off and come back," he throws carelessly after the departing trio. But suddenly his face freezes, the cigarette freezes in his hand, and his eyes fill with an unusual seriousness. The cigarette falls from his weakened fingers as the meaning of what is happening dawns on him. "Where are you going? Stop already." A desperate cry shakes the air as he rushes after her. Cha-gyul, walking next to Moon Gi-sung, only slightly turns around at the insistent, "Hey," without slowing down. And in the thoughts of the bully who rushed after him, the echo echoed, "He's ignoring me." Footsteps leisurely measure out the asphalt, carrying Cha-gyul and Moon Gi-sung away from everything that was left behind. But a persistent hand, suddenly grabbing his shoulder, makes Cha Gyul freeze, and the bully asks with a grin, "Will you come again?" Moon Gi-sung seems unable to contain his growing anxiety, his face distorted with fear, and the bandage on his cheek seems to scream of a recent fight. Cha Gyul supports Moon Gi-sung, whose arm is in a bandage, trying to lead him away from the place as Moon Gi-sung sighs heavily. Cha Gyul's gaze, piercing and full of hidden threat, slides over the frightened face of Moon Gi-sung, who is pressed against him. "That's it," Cha Gyul says quietly, stroking Moon Gi-sung's head comfortingly, as if cementing some unspoken promise. Cha Gyul walks away, leaving Moon Gi-sung, who clutches his head and watches him helplessly next to the stranger in white. The stranger in the kimono turns to Moon Gi-sung, his voice full of concern. "Is this bastard bothering you?" To which Moon Gi-sung only quietly whispers, "No." "What nonsense. Wasn't he just holding you back, looking so menacing, not letting you leave?" the stranger continues. But Moon Gi-sung hesitantly denies. "It wasn't like that." Moon Gi-sung mutters softly, turning away, his words laced with a strange defensiveness. "It's not him." The atmosphere changes abruptly. Shouts of, "Hey kid, come here, come from somewhere around the corner," foreshadowing a new disaster, accompanied by a sharp jolt. Moon Gi-sung is trapped again, surrounded by an aggressive crowd in a dark alley, and the same bully, smirking, casually asks his name. A frightened Moon Gi-sung exhales with difficulty, hiding his gaze, calling out the name Nam Seo. "So, Seo," the bully drawls, his voice full of sarcasm, "you were staring at me so much that I thought you were going to drill a hole in the back of my head." He turns to his hangers-on, and they echo him with a ringing laugh. "Hey, look! Doesn't that stupid look of his give me a hole in my head?" The bully enjoys the moment, his face twisted into a smug grin. The bully's grin fades slightly. He clears his throat and, turning back to Moon Gi-sung, says, "Cough, Seo." Moon Gi-sung looks down, his face filled with despair, while the bully, raising his voice, demands, "So what? I'm asking, what do you want?" One of the bullies reaches out to Moon Gi-sung, who flinches, and the main one, in a drawn-out and ominous voice, says, "We need Seo." But then, as if from nowhere, Cha Gyul appears, his figure towering over the crowd, and astonished voices shout out his name, full of hope or fear. Cha Gyul looks back, his tone brooking no argument. A sleepy Moon Gi-sung opens his eyes with difficulty, trying to comprehend what is happening. Cha Gyul stands before them like a wall, and his question, full of hidden threat, makes the bullies freeze. He turns to the main bully, who looks at Moon Gi-sung with bewilderment, not recognizing him. He just snorts contemptuously, pointing at Moon Gi-sung as if this was some kind of ridiculous joke. But Cha Gyul only smirked, the mockery in his eyes deepening his contempt for his opponent. The main bully's stupid grin causes a whole wave of ridicule among his henchmen. Moon Gi-sung, flushed with embarrassment, feels tears welling up in his eyes. Cha Gyul takes a determined step, ordering the bullies to disperse as if they were nothing more than an annoying obstacle. Then he suddenly hugs Moon Gi-sung, his words sounding like a promise of protection mixed with some playfulness. The main bully, irritated by his behavior, just waves his hand, not wanting to mess with this psycho. Cha Gyul pulls Moon Gi-sung closer, enveloping him in smoke like a shield, hiding him from hostile gazes. Moon Gi-sung, with his frightened face, hears Cha Gyul's quiet whisper, promising a quick release from this situation. Cha Gyul asks about his hug, and his gaze is filled with an incomprehensible tenderness, or perhaps possessiveness. He looks forward, his face becomes serious, and the vape is frozen in his hand, ready to release another stream of smoke. At this time, the bullies, still not fully understanding the situation, begin to whisper, mixing fear with ridicule. Cha Gyul and Moon Gi-sung are turned away, and the bully on the left throws angry curses at their backs. Moon Gi-sung finally relaxes a little, but his gaze is full of questions. Why is Cha Gyul helping him? He glances at Cha Gyul, who seems pleased with himself, and that glance only adds to the mystery. A spark of understanding lights up in Moon Gi-sung's eyes, as if he's about to solve part of this complex riddle. Moon Gi-sung, puzzled by Cha Gyul's sudden silence, tries to understand the reason and asks about the stranger, as if looking for a clue in someone else's eyes. But Cha Gyul just waves it off, trying to calm him down, claiming that that guy is not like that, trying to dispel Moon Gi-sung's worries, which reminds him of Namgyeo's anxiety. The answer is an icy, "So what?" cold and distant, dissolving into the air above the empty schoolyard. Cha Gyul turns around, his gaze full of challenge and a slight smirk, and Moon Gi-sung still can't shake off the weight of anxiety. Moon Gi-sung tries to object, but the words get stuck in his throat, leaving only unspoken excitement and slight embarrassment. Cha Gyul, dissatisfied with the questions, admits that he simply followed, his tone revealing obvious irritation and a reluctance to explain. Who do you even take me for? Cha Gyul's voice sounds indignant, as if his pride has been hurt by the unfair assumption. And now he's already walking away down the narrow alley, leaving Moon Gi-sun alone, and in Cha Gyul's head only a light, dismissive Gi-sung-hyung flashes. Moon Gi-sung watches his friend leave, and sadness mixed with bewilderment can be seen in his eyes, as if he is trying to find a lost thread. Moon Gi-sung's lonely figure freezes in place, his gaze directed somewhere into the distance, into the void where the last echoes of the conversation dissolve. And Cha Gyul, wounded and stubborn, moves away, his steps measuring the distance between them, becoming faster and faster, as if he is running from something. Meanwhile, elsewhere, sunbeams filter through the blinds, casting streaks of light across the walls of a cozy yet somehow abandoned room. Soft light fills the space, emphasizing the silence and creating the feeling of a frozen moment. Nam Geo lies on her bed, her leg in a cast, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, full of reflections and shadows. There is boredom on her face, and the thought is spinning in her head. How boring! Every day seems endless. Time seems to stand still, and Nam Geo involuntarily reaches for his phone, seeking salvation from the monotony of the virtual world. Messages from Moon Gi-sung flash across the screen, old conversations about chocolate milk and training questions, reminiscent of the old days. Namjo, burying his face in his pillow, rereads them, trying to find at least something that could distract him from the melancholy and pain. A missed call and new, persistent messages. Where are you? What are you doing? At practice? Clearly show her growing anxiety. Damn it, Moon Gi-sun never answers when you need him, she whispers, feeling increasingly frustrated and helpless in her stillness. A sudden rustle, a creaking door, as if someone was carefully entering the house. Nam Geo, limping on crutches, looks out into the corridor with hope and fear, trying to understand who dared to disturb her peace. Her face freezes in a mask of surprise and confusion because the person standing on the threshold is not at all the one she was expecting. With his hand bandaged, a sullen and unfriendly Moon Gi-sung appears in the doorway, like a ghost from her thoughts. What's wrong with you? Why so late? Her words escape from astonishment, to which he sharply retorts, What business is it of yours? Instead of explaining, Moon Gi-sung throws poisonous words at her, accusing her of being idle and wanting to annoy him out of boredom. Flaring up at the unfair aggression, Nam Geo tries to slam the door right in his face, wanting to fence himself off from this uninvited meeting. But Moon Gi-sung doesn't back down, holding the door and not letting it close, their faces frozen in confrontation, separated only by a thin gap. What? Her voice is full of confusion as she sees his insistent, irritated face through the crack. Did you come to pester me because Moon Gi-sung himself complained? A bitter reproach bursts out of her, revealing the true reason for his behavior as she sees it. At the same time, under the neon lights of the night city, flickering with 1,000 lights, another scene unfolds. The streets are filled with faceless figures going about their business until two silhouettes stand out from the crowd. The elderly man's face shows concern, and his gaze is full of restrained anxiety, as if he is about to say something important. Gel, he says to Cha Gel, his voice holding a hint of reprimand or anticipation of a difficult conversation. Jae-gel, young and cheeky in his school uniform, blows out a cloud of vapor from his e-cigarette with a completely unperturbed expression. The restrained elegance of his school uniform contrasts with the casual gesture that betrays his disregard for convention. The older man, without hiding his disapproval, gently but persistently suggests that she stop smoking in his presence. Have mercy on me, Cha Gyul says with a slight grin, almost mockingly, not intending to obey. He looks up, and his mocking smile, mixed with a challenge, clearly shows that he does not intend to take the instructions seriously. And while new conflicts flare up on the city streets and secrets are revealed, we, the creators of this review, are forced to make a small digression to remind them of the importance of respecting the original works. Nam Geo, leaning on crutches, directly asks if his behavior today was caused by Moon Gi-sung's complaint, since he usually shows no interest in it. Her face expresses hidden anxiety, and her gaze is full of unspoken questions. The girl, as if trying to diffuse the tension, promises that she won't be angry if he tells the truth. But then her tone becomes stern, she warns. Silence will only make the situation worse, and everything will repeat itself, as it once did. At that moment, her phone vibrates, and Moon Gi-sun's name appears on the screen. Cha Gyul, standing in the doorway with a broken arm, avoids direct eye contact, his posture expressing indecision. Nam Geo, looking at the ringing phone, smiles slyly, as if to say, here's a great chance to ask him himself. Suddenly, Cha Gyul jerks towards the door, trying to prevent her from talking, his movements full of desperation. But Namgyo had already picked up the phone, sitting down and quietly saying, "Hello?" Cha Gyul bursts into the room, angrily asking why she is interfering, while Moon Gi-sung, clearly worried, asks if something urgent has happened. Calmly answering Moon Gi-sung, Namgyo informs him that she has a question for him, her gaze focused. Cha Gyul, pressing himself against the door, screams, demanding that he hang up immediately, his face distorted with despair. Meanwhile, Moon Gi-sung, hidden by his hood, listens intently, his thoughts swirling in a silent pause. His face darkens, a deep sadness appears on it, as if he is about to shed tears of pain or remorse. He then quietly says that he was just trying to get him out of bad company, to which someone next to him clarifies, "Bad company?" Nam Geo listens attentively, her face becoming serious, Moon Ji-sung's words slowly sinking in. With a heavy heart, she hangs up the phone, and the next moment the door handle creaks. Jagyul, full of fatigue and despair, whispers quietly, wanting only one thing, to be left alone. Namgyo stands in the doorway, looking at Cha Gyul, who looks completely defeated, and her face still shows no emotion. And she finally asks him directly what he did that made those bad guys decide to drag him along with them. Loon Ji-song lowered his head and asked Namgyo if she was used to arguing with everyone as persistently as she did with him. She stands limping in the doorway, peering into his pain-clouded gaze. Her face remains inscrutable, but deep in her eyes one can read a difficult choice. He continues his sad confession, admitting to a complete lack of funds and support. His mind's eye flashes back to the years of loneliness when he was just a shadow among his peers. Memories of caustic words and humiliating accusations that still burn in my soul. This cry, full of despair, like an echo of the past, bursts from his chest, revealing the deepest wound. Nam Geo, trying to reach his pain, carefully asks what he lacks to be happy. He looks around the empty rooms, as if showing her, "Here it is, my life full of loneliness." Then, with a bitter smile, he says that she will never be able to understand his pain. Nam Geo, as if accepting his words, sighs heavily and decides to end this conversation. Turning her back, she slowly walks away, taking with her some of the unspoken pain. The sun's rays play across the floor, filling the room with a deceptive sense of peace. On the table, there is a prepared dinner, carefully left by her. Namgyo quickly changes her clothes, getting ready to go out. Her face is serious. Her gaze is directed somewhere into the distance, foreshadowing something important. A light knock, and her hand falls on the doorknob, opening the way into the unknown. "I'll be right back," she says quietly, as if trying to reassure an invisible listener. Loon Ji-sung sits in the room, listening to her instructions about dinner and how to explain her absence to her mother. Left alone, he only sighs deeply, plunging into the whirlpool of his thoughts. Namgyo, with a short, "I'll be right back," as a parting shot, hurriedly leaves the house, leaving Long Ji-sung alone. And outside the window, the city was already plunging into the evening haze, lighting up its bright, inviting lights. Every movement was difficult for her, but her limping gait could not stop her determination. There was a deep thoughtfulness in her eyes, as if she was searching for answers in the shadows of the approaching night. But Long Gi-song interrupts her lonely thoughts, his voice shrill. "What do you even know, Nuna?" Through the false smile, pain appears, an accusation of misunderstanding that gnaws at him from the inside. Namgyo just looks away. Her answer is tired. "I'm not a telepath, so I don't know everything." And it is at this fragile moment that new steps are heard, firm and confident. A piercing gaze, full of unspoken secrets, bursts into their tense scene. Cha Gyul, elegant in his school uniform, casually adjusts his sleeve, showing calm. It appears out of nowhere, as if materializing out of thin air when you least expect it but need it most. A barely noticeable smile plays on his lips, and his gaze is captivating, promising something more. Namgyo looks at him, caught off guard, her heart clenching in surprise. A slight blush fills her cheeks, betraying confusion and long-forgotten feelings. Cha Gyul notices this, and his smile widens, revealing undisguised pleasure. "How do you always manage to appear at times like this?" Namgyo thought. "Just when you want to run away from everything, when it's unbearable to think about anything?" Cha Gyul, as if hearing her thoughts, asks sarcastically, "Were you really thinking about me?" His piercing gaze doesn't let go, enjoying the power he has over her embarrassment. Namgyo just stares back helplessly, unable to utter a word, completely at the mercy of the moment. But the unexpected appearance of a stern man breaks the tension, distracting Cha Gyul. Namgyo tries to hide his confusion as a commanding voice demands attention, leaving him no choice. This man, older and more wise than he is, casts a glance at them, full of disapproval and hidden threat. Nam-gyo instinctively hides behind Moon Ji-sung, only watching the unfolding drama out of the corner of his eye. His steps are firm, and his words are a sharp warning, addressed to Moon Gi-sung and indirectly to Nam-gi-oh about late-night walks. There is tension in the air. The elder condemns Cha-gyul for his frivolity, but the latter, without batting an eye, puts him in his place, demanding that he step aside. Cha-gyul and Nam-gyo stand next to each other, their faces reflecting the gravity of the moment, but each perceives this challenge in their own way. Nam-gyo withdraws into herself, her thoughts wandering in a labyrinth of awkwardness and anxiety after the public censure. Chaejel, noticing her condition, allows himself a barely noticeable, reassuring smile, as if driving away dark clouds. As Cha-gyo leads Nam-gyo away from the scene, he whispers words of comfort, trying to ease her burden. And his support finds a response in her heart, dissolving sadness into a gentle, timid smile. Somewhere in the distance, a persistent vibrating bell rings, breaking into the silence of the evening. It's Moon Gi-sung, his face showing weariness and slight irritation as he holds the phone to his ear, listening to another stream of reproaches. It seems like everyone is discussing his exploits. Photos are popping up in the chat, his sister on crutches, and he himself with the marks of a recent fight, along with caustic comments about his recklessness. A violent brother is a family disaster, someone sums up, hinting that his initiative always ends in disaster. Another interlocutor, the brewer, doesn't mince words, calling his youthful maximalism shittiness, which made Nam-gyo suffer even more. He's already an adult, but completely irresponsible. He should be earning money, not hanging out with dubious characters, the brewer believes. And even more so, don't imagine that his sister owes him something, because her suffering is a direct result of his actions. The honey user adds that it's easier to play the victim than to spend energy correcting mistakes. Well, who is right and who is wrong in this complicated story remains to be seen, but for now there is only confusion. Nam-gyo tries to tease him by calling him grumpy, as if he were an old man, but Cha-gyul softens, assuring her that she is free to do as she sees fit, and even admits that he is glad to meet them. Nam-gyo seems amused by his reaction until an unexpected ringing on Cha-gyul's phone, with Moon Ji-sung's name on the screen, interrupts their moment. Nam-gyo's eyes widen in surprise or worry as she looks at Chae-gyul, who stands with his back to her. Her hand reflexively reaches for the phone, and an alarmed cry of "Gyo" pierces the silence. The voice on the other end of the line sounds concerned, demanding an explanation as to why she hasn't answered her calls. It's Moon Gi-sung, and there's genuine concern in his gaze. He relays Seo's words about her sudden departure and non-return, and carefully asks if she is angry. In response, Nam-gyo asks a puzzled question. Angry? At whom? Moon Gi-sung continues, trying to figure out who was the cause of her anger, Seo or perhaps himself. Leaning on crutches, Nam-gyo considers his words, realizing his guilt. Cha-gyul, standing nearby, concludes that Moon Gi-sung is hiding something from him, and this puts Nam-gyo in a very awkward position. His gaze drops to Nam-gyo, as if trying to read her thoughts, but she only lowers her eyes. The camera lingers on her bandaged leg and slippered foot, emphasizing her vulnerability. Nam-gyo looks up, full of worry, trying to understand his true intentions. Her eyes reflect deep confusion and bewilderment. But Cha-gyul's expression remains impenetrable, hiding any emotions. But then, as if in an attempt to reassure her, his hand gently touches her palm. Nam-gyo looks at him, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. Her bandaged leg seems to bear not only the physical but also the invisible wounds of this tangled story. A bandaged leg, sneakers, every step reminds me of the ordeal I've gone through. A dark alley, littered with old crates, becomes the backdrop for another secret meeting. Chae-gyul notices her nervousness, a slight anxiety that is revealed by barely noticeable sweat. Their hands intertwine, a brief touch full of hidden meanings that creates a subtle spark. Nam-gyo flinches, her heartbeat quickening as Cha-gyul quietly calls her name, bringing her back to reality. Her eyes are wide open, a mixture of fear and heightened sensitivity. A bead of sweat runs down his temple, indicating internal tension. Through her excitement, she tries to return to the conversation, her voice trembling, asking about the information she has obtained. The sudden roar of an engine rushes past, drowning out the words, as if not wanting to reveal the secret. She didn't hear whose name was called, and the feeling of missing the thread increases her anxiety. Cha-gyul waits patiently, his gaze piercing the veil of noise, promising clarity. He moves closer, whispering that it is too noisy around, trying to overcome the barriers to their conversation. Now his words are clear, confirming her suspicions that he knows what she so needs. Their fingers clasped tighter, a gesture of unspoken support and shared destiny. Namgyo slowly digests each word, pondering the meaning of what was said. I get it, she whispers, realizing this isn't a conversation for a random alley, and puts it off until tomorrow. He looks down at her, his posture understanding and willingness to wait as long as it takes. A slight smile touches the corners of his lips, as if he knows something more than he's ready to reveal now. But in Namgyo's eyes, a new, sharp question is born, piercing all other thoughts. And then she asks a question that could change everything. Do you know my brother? Chaegul's face freezes, his gaze shifting to the side as if he was weighing every word. Namgyo, looking over his shoulder, feels a wave of anxiety growing. Her suspicions grow, and she asks him outright if he is hiding something from her. Cha Gyul turns to face her, a slight, evasive smile playing on his lips. There is something inexplicable flashing in the depths of his eyes, some long-standing secret that draws you along. Namgyo, however, does not let him escape the answer, her gaze searching for clarity. He begins to speak. His voice sounds measured but hides his true thoughts. There seems to be an invisible wall between them, and Cha Gyul speaks words that emphasize this distance. But then he adds with a mysterious smile that this is only for now, leaving a hint about the future. Namgyo becomes embarrassed. Her cheeks become slightly flushed, and her heart skips a beat. He leans towards her, almost touching her, and frivolously advises her not to bother her head with it. But Namgyo, clutching her crutches, is not ready to let go of the topic so easily. She resolutely refuses, and then Cha Gyul, as if giving in, takes the crutches into his own hands. He turns and walks down the alley, leaving her alone in the middle of the night. But Namgyo watches him go with renewed determination, refusing to give up. A bold thought is born in her head, which immediately bursts out, breaking the silence. Cha Gyul stops, surprised by her sudden and bold question. He turns around slowly, his gaze piercing the gloom. Namgyo catches his gaze, her face flushing again, and, mustering all her courage, she asks him point-blank if he is willing to reveal his secrets if their intimacy deepens. Cha Gyul only lowers his head slightly, his gaze remaining unchanged, as if Namgyo's question had not reached his ears at all, but sounded into the void. Meanwhile, Moon Gi-sung watches them from afar, a slight, barely noticeable smile playing on his face. Namgyo, feeling the cold rejection, lets out a quiet, almost soundless sigh, the tension of the moment slightly releasing her shoulders. But he quickly pulls himself together, trying to keep the same cheerful smile on his face, albeit with a hint of embarrassment. She takes a small step, balancing on her crutches, perhaps to change the subject or simply to move away from an unpleasant conversation. Later, in the bright hallway of the school, Namgyo finds Moon Ji-sung, and their conversation seems important and serious. He listens to her attentively, his usually gentle expression giving way to thoughtfulness, foreshadowing a difficult dialogue. When Namgyo asks him directly about Cha Gyul, Moon Ji-sung answers briefly but expressively, yeah. She asks if he's seen this guy before, maybe when he was talking to Seo, or, more worryingly, bullying him. Moon Gi-sung, looking away slightly, admits that no, yesterday was the first time he saw them together. Namgyo, still puzzled, asks how he knew about Cha Gyul then, and Moon Ji-sung reluctantly replies that he asked around. He gestures with his bandaged hand, explaining that, as far as he has been able to determine, this man hardly. Namgyo silently looks at her leg in a cast, Moon Ji-sung's words causing her to fall into deep thought. She looks up at Moon Gi-sung, her face expressing mixed feelings, curiosity, and slight disappointment at the scant information. Namgyo quietly says, a little, perhaps agreeing with his general conclusion or recognizing the complexity of the situation. Moon Gi-sung, looking out the window at the schoolyard, shares the bits of information he's collected. They're the same age based on their tie, and Cha Gyul doesn't have a father, but a certain annoying uncle looks after him. And then, as if materializing from the shadows, Cha Gyul himself appears, his gaze impenetrable and cold, foreshadowing the inevitable. His words to Namgyo are piercingly clear, like an icy stab into the very heart of her hopes. You and I are not that close. She looks down, the hope in her eyes dims, and she whispers quietly, bitterly, just forget it. Namgyo and Moon Jae-seong stand apart, separated by the glass of a classroom, the world around them seeming as distant and indecipherable as the mysteries they are trying unsuccessfully to unravel. While Namgyo is left alone, her classmate, looking out the window, thoughtfully says her name as if sighing about an old habit. Are they arguing again? The girl mutters discontentedly, turning to her comrades, whose looks are full of mixed feelings and some irritation. The same girl, with her head down, is looking for a way out of the situation, while her neighbor, having caught a fragment of her thoughts, looks at her questioningly, not understanding what method she is talking about. Meanwhile, Nam Geo stands by the window, leaning on crutches, and her image, lonely and fragile, seems to reflect her inner experiences. Suddenly, as if distracted from reality, an image flashes on the phone screen. A stranger, shrouded in mystery, lights a cigarette. The smell of dust and old sports equipment fills the warehouse of the gym, the doors of which are thrown open, revealing Nam Geo sitting on the floor amidst the chaos. Piles of dirty uniforms, forgotten balls and cones, all lying haphazardly, awaiting their fate with only a dim light filtering through the bars. Hunched over, Nam Geo tries to scrub stains from her mud-soaked t-shirt, her hands moving tiredly, every rustle of fabric echoing in the quiet warehouse. Sweat runs down her forehead and her eyes show exhaustion and deep disappointment, but she continues to fight stubbornly against the dirt. Why should I scrub this off? An angry whisper escapes my lips, and my thoughts race. It's easier to throw away these dirty rags than to waste my energy on them. Her face is contorted with anger, her brows drawn together, and every muscle tense with a helpless rage that she cannot express otherwise. Suddenly, the silence is broken by footsteps, and a girl appears on the threshold, asking a short, puzzled question about the discarded rag. Namgeo looks up and their eyes meet. Her classmate is standing in the doorway like a ghost from the past, watching her suffer. Her gaze is calm. A light, barely noticeable smile plays on her lips, as if she is not at all surprised by this picture. She comes closer, bends down, picks up a discarded rag from the floor, and calmly reminds him of the coach's words. After all, we were told to scrub everything until it shines. Namgeo only presses her lips together tighter, trying to contain her rising emotions, her gaze full of pain and resentment. Bitterness and fatigue are mixed in her eyes. She looks away, as if trying to hide her vulnerability. A classmate clutches a volleyball, her voice soft as she asks, "Do you think this is the right way?" But then adds that she came for a reason. A small smile appears on her face again. She clutches the ball to her chest, and there is a subtle hope in her posture. She then offers point blank, "If you're so bored, why don't you help me clean?" challenging her in action. But an inner voice seems to resist, whispering that this is not quite right. She glances at him with displeasure, wondering if her help to the other person would render him completely useless. Suddenly, realization hits her, causing her to gasp in surprise. One awkward step, and now your foot accidentally steps on someone's bag, causing a light knock. Pretending that everything is fine, she smiles encouragingly, wishing her luck with faith in her abilities. But it was all a deception. A sharp swing of the towel betrayed her true intention, and anger distorted her face. The footsteps stop when someone stops abruptly, crying out in surprise. She freezes in disbelief, realizing that her throw was interrupted before it even began. She glanced at the volleyball and suddenly thought it would be better to leave it here because she already had practice waiting for her. But as soon as she moves away, the ball falls off its shelf with a crash, landing next to the bag. Namgio's face twists into a grimace of impotent rage and despair at this unfortunate accident. A figure appears in the distance, and a call is heard demanding Namgio's attention. Meanwhile, the dojo is bustling with activity. Taekwondo training is in full swing, and kicks are being honed. The rhythmic commands, 1, 2, accompany the precise movements of the legs hovering in the air. One of them, clenching her fists, decisively shouts, "Yes," confirming her readiness. The trainer, looking sternly, demands that she repeat the exercise, despite her obvious fatigue. He gives the command again, counting down the rhythm for a new round of tests. And again the legs flash in the air, following the commands 1, 2, without knowing a break. Every movement is honed, every blow is precise, but the pain is already starting to creep in. Namgeo grits her teeth, but a groan escapes her chest and tears of exhaustion well up in her eyes. While Namgeo overcomes her pain, at the other end of the hall, Unsu seems to have reached her limit under Cha Gyul's stern gaze. Exhausted, she looks up when the coach suddenly addresses her. Blushing with fatigue and embarrassment, Eonsu turns to the mentor, waiting for his words. Cha Gyul, seemingly oblivious to her condition, reminds them of the opportunity that opens up in the absence of their main rival, Geo, urging them to give it their all. Unsu clenches her fist, a glimmer of determination lighting up her eyes. This is her opportunity, and she won't let it slip away. Through the fatigue, a determination breaks through. She will do everything to win this long-awaited medal. However, the weight of expectations or the renewed exhaustion force her to bow her head under the mentor's intense gaze. A sudden call breaks her from her thoughts, and Unsu, turning away from Cha Gyul, hurries to respond to her name. Her fist trembles again, as if every cell in her body is resisting, but her spirit remains unbending despite the approaching spasms. As Unsu slowly walks away, Namgyo, noticing her exhausted appearance, calls out her name in alarm. Namgyo looks at her with genuine concern, a bead of sweat glistening on her forehead, betraying her own worries after the training. Handing over a bottle of water, Namgyo offers a break, which Unsu accepts gratefully. Unsu drinks greedily, trying to stop the growing dehydration. Every drop seems like salvation at this moment. Finally, she breaks away from the bottle, exhaling heavily, and the fatigue washes over her again in a wave, but not as all-consuming. Despite Namgyo's encouragement, Yunsu loses her temper, complaining about how the coach constantly brings up a certain Geo as an example, which irritates her beyond belief. Namgyo listens intently, her expression showing both understanding and slight concern, before she asks about Unsu's future plans. Yunso looks questioningly at Namgyo, not immediately understanding what she means by future plans. Namgyo reminds Unsu of her long-held desire to show Gyo who's boss, while the other athletes practice their punches behind their backs. Yunsu pauses for a moment, a small, almost predatory smile playing across her lips as Namgyo waits for an answer. But Unsu's words, which sounded like a sinister joke, caused Namgyo to be clearly surprised and slightly frightened. Namgyo is shocked, her eyes wide with obvious disbelief and indignation. But Onsu just looks at her with imperturbable calm, almost mockingly warning her of the possible consequences. The coach's sudden whistle echoes down the hallway, interrupting their tense conversation. Yunso smiles again, and her words, "I'm afraid of you," carry a hint of ambiguous irony. There is a mysterious half-smile on her face, which reveals hidden confidence in her plan. Meanwhile, among the abandoned sports equipment, another Iansu sleeps, bound in a plaster cast. Slowly, with a barely audible groan, the girl begins to come to her senses, stretching out her numb arms. Her heavy eyelids flutter open, and she feels an unpleasant heaviness in her injured leg. Struggling through the pain, she sits up, trying to comprehend where she is and how much time has passed. Her gaze wanders around the semi-dark room, her head buzzing from awakening and questions. It was already completely dark outside, and panic was rising in her soul. She had slept until late at night. Onsu looks around, trying to remember the recent events that led her here. Her gaze falls on a jacket neatly thrown on next to her, clearly not hers. Nearby, in the semi-darkness, a male figure sits, and his calm voice is heard. "Are you awake?" It's Moon Gi-sung, sitting with his arms crossed, his gaze full of discreet concern despite the late hour. Unsu looks at him, her face expressing confusion and slight bewilderment at her unexpected companion. Moon Gi-sung chuckles as he says their forced seclusion has led to a kind of bonding. Yunsu is still sitting on the bench, aware of the awkwardness and strangeness of the situation she finds herself in. The moment hangs in the air, full of unspoken questions and premonitions. What awaits them next in this unusual tandem remains to be seen. CHAGL breaks the silence of the warehouse, addressing the sleeping figure as if he had been waiting for this moment. NAMGIO comes to her senses. Her eyes slowly adjust to the semi-darkness, and incomprehension is written on her face. Moon Gai-song, with his usual casual smile, calmly watches what is happening. With a hint of dangerous anticipation, Moon Jae-song says that it seems like they will definitely get closer today. NAMGO, trapped in this cramped space, lies on a bench, her crutches a reminder of her recent injury. The face of Namgyo is distorted by anxiety. She feels that something is going wrong, trying to understand what is happening. CHA Gel doesn't hide his irritation. His question is full of cold surprise. What are you even talking about? Namgyo, stumbling on crutches, tries to leave the room, and one question is spinning in his head. How long Moon is Gi-song sitting here? Panic is growing, and Namgyo desperately grabs the door handle, wanting to get out of the trap as quickly as possible. However, the door does not give in, and on Nam's face, Gio reflects sudden horror. What? She looks at the locked door in confusion, trying to figure out the reason, until Moon Gi-song just smirks in the distance. And Moon Gi-song, enjoying her confusion, casually says, "Because." The camera slowly pans towards the door, revealing an ominous lock hanging on the latch. Now everything becomes clear. The door is locked. NAMGIO turns to CHAGL, her voice shaking with indignation. "Didn't you see how they closed it? What were you even doing?" Inner voice of CHAGEL wonders. Usually no one comes here. The empty corner of the warehouse, surrounded by sports equipment, only adds to the feeling of isolation. Namgio tries to pull himself together, frantically searching for his phone. Okay, phone, where is it? Her eyes widen in horror when she realizes the phone is gone. And outside, behind locked doors, empty classrooms await the morning, unaware of the drama unfolding within. The contrast between the bustle of the day and the silence of the night is highlighted by a lonely smartphone forgotten on a desk. Locked in, they try to find a way out, but Chaegul is adamant. It won't work. A shadow of a barely noticeable smirk plays across his face, hiding his true intentions. Namgio desperately cries out for help, but the empty silence of the hall only confirms her fears. Knocks on the metal door echo down the hallway, but find no response. Moon Gi-sung watches her panic, confusion, and hidden pain visible in his eyes. He looks away, as if he can't bear to look at her despair, while Cha Gyul only casts an attentive, almost studying glance. The sound of Moon Gi-sung's crutches breaks the silence as he slowly approaches. It feels awkward, but Moon Gi-sung overcomes himself and moves towards Ka Gyul. Cha Gyul sits with his gaze downcast, his posture full of hidden tension. Namgio watches this strange coming together with bated breath. Their hands meet in the air, like a bridge between two worlds. Cha Gyul finally stands up, their gazes meeting, filled with the unspoken. "Why are you taking my hand as if nothing happened?" Moon Gi-sung asks quietly, clearing his throat awkwardly. Cha Gyul looks away, his face unreadable, hiding any reaction, but their fingers are already intertwined, in a silent embrace that speaks louder than words. Moon Gi-sung awkwardly tries to formulate his feelings, while Namgyo already anticipates Ka Gyul's next avoidance of a direct answer. But instead, Cha Gyul just suddenly exhaled, his face turning slightly red with embarrassment. He jerks suddenly, his eyes widening to reveal true, unexpected emotions. Moon Gi-sung, seeing his reaction, immediately asks him anxiously if he did something wrong. Chaegul, blushing, tries to utter something unintelligible, offering to move away so as not to embarrass him. Namgyo, unable to contain her surprise, cried out in shock, stunned by his embarrassment. Cha Gyul only turns away more, wanting to sink into the ground from awkwardness. Namgyo, realizing the ridiculousness of the situation, exhales loudly, trying to control his laughter. The warehouse seemed to freeze, giving the heroes a minute to catch their breath and collect their thoughts. Orange cones and basketballs in boxes silently testified to the chaos that has passed. Somewhere among the boxes and shelves, Namgyo tries to calm his inner chaos. From the height of one of the shelves, she finally comes to her senses a little, assessing the situation. Her gaze falls on Cha Gyul, and she, already calmer, carefully begins the conversation. Cha Gyul, sitting on the bench, glances at her, asking about the reasons for her overnight confinement here. Namgyo, tired but determined, replies that she was cleaning the vests. She points to some neatly folded but clearly dirty vests scattered nearby. Cha Gyul looks at her thoughtfully. Something doesn't add up in his head. We, Gio, also think that something in this story looks extremely suspicious. Cha Gyul, covering her mouth with her hand, asks the question directly. Did the coach really know about her presence and simply locked the door? A sharp light of insight flashes in Cha Gyul's eyes, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And then, like a flash, someone's image appears in his mind, and with it an unexpected guess. Everything falls into place, and rage flares up in his soul. He knows exactly who is behind all this. Namgyo turns around sharply and looks at him in horror and anger, shocked by his words. Namgyo looks on in horror, her face distorted with shock at what she heard, and her body is shaking violently. And then a memory pops into my mind, Cha Gyul carefully folding her jacket, which Namgyo had carelessly thrown aside. Namgyo herself recalls with embarrassment how she felt warmth and protection in this simple, yet so familiar piece of clothing. Moon Gi-sung teases Cha Gyul about Namgyo's reaction to his jacket, then quickly apologizes, not wanting to offend. Namgyo only remained silent in embarrassment, realizing that her sudden reaction could have been misinterpreted. Moon Gi-sung smiles kindly at her confusion and quickly reassures her that it's all just a joke. Meanwhile, night falls upon the city, and the streets become filled with secrets, where every house holds its own stories. Footsteps sound distinctly in the darkness, ascending the old, dilapidated steps leading somewhere higher. And now we see Cha Gyul. But he has changed. Now his face is adorned with a scar, and hidden sadness can be read in his eyes. He turned to the gate, speaking words that could have been consolation but sound more like a bitter farewell. His gaze is now empty, as if reflecting an internal struggle, or perhaps the realization that he is left completely alone. The rain begins to wash over the streets, as if washing away traces of events long past, leaving only cold and alienation. Each drop taps on the rooftops, creating a melancholic symphony, and the light from the lanterns dissipates in the wet haze. But then, reality breaks into fragments. A phone screen flashes before us, showing an innocent correspondence full of intriguing hints. It would seem like nothing special, but even these lines contain a hidden meaning that foreshadows new plot twists. Suddenly, we are transported again. In the school gym, someone is solicitously inquiring about the well-being of others. Nam Geo, clearly taken aback, looks at the unexpected question with confusion. Moon Jisung points worriedly at her light clothing, as if anticipating the inevitable cold that might overtake her. Nam Geo looks down at her skirt, her eyes revealing her own carelessness and vulnerability. They sit next to each other, lost in their thoughts, until Moon Gaisung gestures for her attention to something ahead. Moon Gi-sung caught her attention, and then Chagyul turned around, his gaze full of a silent question. Namgyo doesn't understand what exactly he means, and her brows furrow slightly. Chagyul quickly takes off his jacket, and Namgyo behind him steps back in confusion. Chaegyul's gaze becomes more stern. He is clearly worried about something. With strong fingers, he crumples the thick fabric of the jacket, preventing it from falling. Namgyo, blushing, tries to understand the meaning of his actions because she is sure that his jacket fits her perfectly. Jagyul dismisses her thoughts, gesturing that he will explain everything later, and pulls down his sleeve. Namgyo's face falls in confusion as she begins to realize what's going on. And here Chagyul stands, arms outstretched, his jacket worn over his shirt but not through the sleeves. She looks at him, and he holds on to his jacket, as if not knowing what to do with it. Cha Gyul looks at the piece of clothing with bewilderment, not understanding what could be wrong with it. Namgyo closes her eyes, trying to convince herself that she is not cold at all. Her unfinished sentence hangs among the sports equipment. Cha Gyul looks at her with a soft gaze, sure that she simply does not want to admit her discomfort. Namgyo finally admits to herself that she is very cold and is angry at her ill-fitting cast. She explains that she usually wears sports clothes, which keep her warmer than her school uniform. Cha Gyul, with a calm expression, begins to unzip his pants, offering them to her as well, which causes Namgyo to scream in panic. Cha Gyul holds back his laughter, covering his mouth with his hand, admitting that it was just a joke. Namgyo looks away, her face thoughtful, her cheeks slightly flushed with embarrassment. Her gaze slid over him, and Namgyo realized with a sense of urgency that Cha Gyul was probably cold without his jacket too. Cha catches her gaze attentively, something elusive flashes in his eyes. Namgyo, embarrassed by her sudden boldness, begins timidly. Her hand rises slightly, inviting him to join, but her words are hesitant. He looks away, as if considering her proposal, his face unreadable. A small sigh escapes his lips, as he tries to collect his thoughts. Namgyo quickly explains that he doesn't mean anything by it, but Chagyul only casually agrees. He touches her neck, lost in his own thoughts, the air between them tense. She insists that her intentions are pure, but Chagyul smiles and teases her, saying that he's only joking. Namgyo nods shyly, hiding her face among the sports equipment, her heart pounding wildly. Her cheeks burn and she looks down, feeling the awkwardness of the moment but not retreating. She speaks again, reminding him that he is probably cold too, and that they will be warmer together. And so Namgyo is already suggesting that he move closer, cover himself with the jacket which is already his. Cha Gyul slowly descends next to him, his movements barely audible in the silence of the warehouse. Namgyo freezes, her gaze fixed on the floor, awaiting his final decision. They are now sitting very close, their shoulders touching, creating a small island of warmth. Okay, Cha Gyul says, and there's an unexpected softness in his voice. He chuckles, finding the situation funny and a little cliched, but Namgyo looks away. Her hand involuntarily touches the cold concrete. Her thoughts become confused, and the words get stuck in her throat. I know it looks like flirting, Namgyo finally blurts out, but I can't help it. Chagyul leans towards her, his eyes sparkling with genuine interest. He asks, "What?" But Chagyul only intercepts her hand, his gaze piercing, as if penetrating into the very soul. Namgyo's heart does a somersault in surprise, and an embarrassing blush fills her cheeks. He smiles slightly at her reaction and leans closer, closing the distance. Then, pulling back slightly, he gives her a playful but suggestive warning about the future. And his laughter, deep and sincere, echoes in the silence of the forgotten pantry, filling it with living warmth. He takes his jacket but doesn't leave, just looks down at her, as if reading unspoken thoughts in her eyes. The dim light of a street lamp shines through the dusty window, creating strange, moving shadows. The air is filled with the smell of stale dust, which tickles the nostrils, reminding one of solitude and time that has stood still here. The cement floor gives off a cool breeze that envelops the tired body in this secluded and forgotten corner of the world. Jagyul falls asleep, his breathing even and calm, immersed in the world of his own dreams, free from worries. Namgyo lies next to her, her gaze sliding over him, studying every feature of his face as if trying to remember. Memories of past moments bring a blush to her cheeks, bringing a gentle warmth to the cold night. Every night, looking at the stars, she involuntarily remembers this very night, the night of their secret solitude, the night his invisible presence warmed her in the cold closet like a quiet promise. He was a star to her, bright and unattainable, whose sudden radiance illuminated her lonely world. But suddenly, his eyes open and a spark flashes in them, breaking the peaceful silence. He quietly looks at the sleeping Namgyo, and his hand, involuntarily, as if by a magnet, reaches out to her. And while the heroes balance on the brink of the unknown, their story is already sparking heated debate among those watching from the sidelines. Every touch, every glance on the screen evokes a storm of emotions, keeping viewers guessing about the next twist in the plot. After all, such moments leave no one indifferent, and even the question of age rating becomes the subject of passionate debate. Perhaps these messages contain only a foretaste of the inevitable, or perhaps the heroes themselves are not yet fully aware of their true feelings. Doubts hang in the air, taking the form of an insoluble tangle of thoughts. Meanwhile, deep in the school warehouse, immersed in the pre-dawn blue, a cool silence reigns. Between the sports equipment and dusty boxes, time seems to slow down, waiting. Only rare, timid rays of sun break through the barred windows, drawing ghostly patterns on the concrete floor. This corner, usually filled with the noise and echoes of training, is now empty and silent, keeping its secrets. But Chejul's gaze, deep and focused, breaks this static picture, foreshadowing an important moment. They are here, in solitude, where every movement is filled with tenderness and hidden meaning. Namgyo's unexpected sneeze breaks the ringing silence, bringing them back from the world of dreams to reality. A slight look of embarrassment crosses Chejul's face, but he only hugs her tighter, protecting her from the cold. Namgyo, immersed in a deep, almost forgotten sleep, dozes peacefully, not noticing anything around her. Chejul, leaning over her, allows himself a rare but deep smile, full of warmth and care. His touches are gentle, almost weightless, as if he is afraid to disturb her fragile peace. The world around them seems to freeze, watching this vulnerable moment. The shadows on the floor lengthen, and the air becomes thicker, hinting at the slow passage of time. Finally, Namgyo slowly comes to, letting out a small, sleepy sigh of relief. Chagel's voice gently brings her out of her slumber, and she looks at him with slight bewilderment, feeling the moisture on her lips. He looks at her, patiently waiting for her to fully wake up before breaking the morning silence. In response to her surprised question about waking up early, Chagyul calmly replies that he himself just woke up. But it seems Kagul is ready to offer something more than just a chance meeting, starting a sentence full of intrigue. "When we go outside," Chejul says quietly, "tell her we don't know each other." Namgyo, taken by surprise, cannot hide her bewilderment. Chejul's face remains impassive, hiding his true motives. With a slight grin, he throws out only a laconic, "It will be better this way," leaving her to guess. But for Namgyo, these words only multiply the questions, forcing her to demand explanations. Without waiting for an answer, Chagyul decisively knocks on the door, as if announcing his presence. Outside, a guard walks past, unaware of the prisoners, until sounds penetrate the metal. But the lock rattles treacherously, responding to blows from within. The guard freezes, his face contorted in surprise as the meaning of what he heard dawns on him. Chejul knocks again, more insistently, trying to get attention. And again, outside, peacefully and ordinarily, the same guard passes by, while the sounds inside grow louder. The iron bolt again responds with a weak but distinct sound. The guard, frightened and wary, finally realizes that there is someone inside. Cha-gel, skillfully adjusting herself, feigns shock and begs to open the door. Namgyo, taken aback by this unexpected game, involuntarily shouts out his name. But Cha-gel puts her finger to her lips, calling for silence and keeping their secret. The door creaks open, and the young student appears before the astonished guard. Taken by surprise, the guard demands an explanation until his gaze falls on a second figure in the depths of the room. Seeing Namgyo with a cast, the guard begins to suspect something is wrong, and his questions pour out one after another, full of indignation. Now that Chagyul has disappeared, the guard turns to Namgyo, trying to figure out what connects this strange couple. Namgyo falls silent, her gaze turning inward, as if she were searching for answers in the depths of her own memory. No, she refuses to believe the guard's version because she couldn't have been so easily mistaken. Meanwhile, Moon Gi-sung, as if sensing impending trouble, feels a strange uneasiness. He wanders through winding streets that wind up and down, plunging into a labyrinth of old houses. Fatigue is overwhelming, but something drives him forward, through the sleepy morning silence. Every step is difficult, but the goal calls, forcing you to overcome endless climbs. No matter how many times he came here, this area always seemed like a challenge, a series of endless stairs. Suddenly he stops, and the thought flashes through his head that it is here, among these steps, that the person he needs is hiding. He examines the shabby gates, whose dilapidation seems to scream about long-forgotten secrets. Suddenly it dawns on him, this is the place. This door must be what he is looking for. The heavy, rusty gate leaves look impregnable, guarding the peace of the inhabitants. Hesitantly, he presses the doorbell, waiting for an answer that could change everything. But silence is the only answer, and Moon Gi-sung is perplexed, pressing again and again. The irritation is growing. Has Cha-gyul really isolated himself from the world so much that he even turned off his call? Desperate, he begins knocking on the gate, shouting a name that echoes down the deserted street. In response to this noise, a disgruntled mutter is heard, and the creaking of the door announces the appearance of the owner. Finally, a man emerges from behind the gate, his face distorted with rage at the early intrusion. But the person standing at the threshold is not the one he expected, and the question sounds with a touch of aggressive surprise. It's Che-gyul, but his face is covered in bruises and there's confusion in his eyes. Moon Gi-sung is shocked. What happened to Cha-gyul's face? Just recently, he was perfectly fine. Cha-gyul lets out a short, heart-rending "fuck," his gaze directed at the ground, as if trying to hide his pain. Suddenly, Moon Ji-sun appears at the door, his face expressing curiosity, but it soon turns to shock. Cha-gyul, trying to look casual, tries to push Moon Gi-sung back, urging him to sleep. But Moon Gi-sung has already seen him, and Cha-gyul, with pain on his face, insistently suggests that they step away to talk in private. Moon Gi-sung seemed to only smirk as he looked at his beaten friend, his eyes hiding something. They step outside, and the gray buildings around them seem to bear witness to their tense conversation. Moon Gi-sung covers his face with his hand, his irritation spilling out. He claims he spent a sleepless night because of Cha-gyul. Cha-gyul, sitting on the steps, does not understand what his fault is, because it was Moon Gi-sung who could not close his eyes. With a battered face, he lights a cigarette, gesturing to his injuries, trying to convey the scale of what happened and accuse Moon Gi-sung of indifference. But Moon Gi-sung only stares back, his eyes showing no pity or understanding. He openly asks if Cha-gyul thinks he cares, showing a complete lack of empathy. Che-gyul touches her swollen cheek, as if checking the integrity of her battered face. Then he runs his hand over the other side, bitterly noting that at least it looks not bad. Moon Gi-sung coldly warns that he might ruin this side too if Cha-gyul continues to talk nonsense. Che-gel, through her pain, calls him a freak and demands an explanation for such inexplicable aggression. The street watches this strange confrontation in silence. Finally, Cha-gyul realizes the reason. It was Moon Gi-sung who locked him in a storage room. Moon Gi-sung just shrugs, coldly saying, "So what?" He takes a drag on his cigarette and mockingly asks if Cha-gyul wants to thank him for being locked up with the girl, not expecting him to get out so quickly. And then, with a devilish grin, Moon Gi-sung adds, "Do one more thing for me." Cha-gyul, already battered, looks at Moon Gi-sung and deep confusion can be seen in his eyes. Moon Gi-sung leans towards him, his words threatening, "No one must know that you are involved." The tight grip on Cha-gyul's neck tightens, and Moon Gi-sung's face says it all. "You haven't told anyone yet, right?" His gaze is piercing, demanding an immediate response, confirmation of complete submission. Fear mixed with pain is clearly visible on Cha-gyul's face. Every drop of sweat is evidence of hopelessness. He nods, silently agreeing to all the conditions, realizing that he has no choice. Moon Gi-sung casually pats his cheek, as if stroking a loyal dog. There is a slight smile on his face, full of self-satisfaction and anticipation. This gesture is an echo of what happened, a reminder of the helplessness and innocence that became a pawn in his games. While some weave webs of intrigue, others, in the silence of the early morning, try to catch every rustle, every nuance of this drama. Away from these rooftops and dirty deals, the world continued as usual, but even there, its secrets were hidden. In one of the rooms where everyday life reigned, a man appears, noticing Namgyo at the table. She greets him, a teacher who seems not yet to fully comprehend the depth of her recent trials. With fatherly care, he throws a towel over her shoulders, trying to warm her after the cold night. The teacher asks, confirming that Namgyo spent the entire night locked in, berating herself for not having installed the electronic lock for a long time. Her trainer was looking for her, but no one could have guessed that she was locked in, as the storage room seemed to be closed for the night. No one could have imagined that there was someone inside, and Namgyo only remembered how she fell asleep. Waking up in complete darkness, she didn't know how much time had passed, because she didn't even have a watch with her. Somewhere in the shadows, Moon Ji-sung still kept his sinister secret, as if conducting an invisible orchestra of destinies. And Namgyo, trying to hide her shock and fear, insisted that she didn't know anyone, denying what had happened. Chagyul tried to pry details out of Namgyo by asking her to look at the students' photos, but the girl only shook her head, remembering only pitch darkness. She tried to convince herself that it was just an accident, that they had both simply fallen asleep and been accidentally locked in. But the nervous twitching of her fingers betrayed her true state. Fear still gripped her heart. Jagul, on the other hand, was serious and worried, understanding the gravity of the situation and warning Gio of the possible consequences. Naively, almost childishly, she tried to calm him down, assuring him that she was fine, but Chagyul was not going to leave this incident unattended. Deep down, Namgyo believed that her parents would understand and accept her version of events. A sudden ringing sound broke the tense silence, like a voice from another world. Gio answered us, and it was clear from her face that it was her mother, exhausted by anxiety, demanding an explanation. The girl lied, pretending to be tired and sleepy at school, trying to hide the true horror of the night. The mother did not understand how this could happen, and her words about running away from home only aggravated the feeling of guilt. With concern in her voice, Namgyo asked if her mother had contacted the police. That was her main fear. At this time, unaware of the depth of what had happened, the mother was busy with household chores, trying to distract herself from her worries. With maternal concern, she asked her daughter to warn her next time if she was late. Namgyo hastened to assure that she would definitely return home today. The call ended, the mother was rushing to work, leaving her daughter alone with her worries. The beeps on the phone seemed deafening, leaving Namgyo in a ringing silence and a stream of thoughts. Already at home, among familiar walls, Namgyo seemed lost, her injured leg serving as a grim reminder of what had happened. The upcoming competition was weighing on her, but her father, trying to give her strength, suggested a short walk to take her mind off things. The memories of her training and her taekwondo skills only served to heighten the contrast with her current state, that of an ordinary schoolgirl with a broken leg. She made herself believe that her lie about sleeping at school would prevent any problems, drowning out her inner cry for help. The teacher patiently continued his interrogation, trying to extract at least some clue from her memories. But on the face she showed to the world there was a mask of serenity, hiding the true torment. "No, I don't remember anything," Namgyo answered dryly, her gaze empty. The teacher sighed heavily, his gaze betraying growing anxiety and helplessness in front of this wall of silence. He asked her to let him know if anything came up and, with fatherly concern, sent her to the first aid station. Namgyo responded with a dazzling smile, as if confirming her non-involvement, her lightness. A playful laugh escaped her lips, making those around her believe in her carefree nature. Meanwhile, in the corridor, away from this falsehood, Chagyul and Moon Gi-sung exchanged anxious glances. Their faces expressed unspoken excitement, a premonition of something wrong hung in the air. As the teacher approached, Chajel quickly nodded, confirming that they were ready to follow. The teacher's stern shout urged them on, and the boys eagerly moved on. But the look of one of the schoolgirls, the one standing nearby, was full of hidden anxiety. Her friend, unable to bear the tension, began worriedly, Unsu, let's talk somewhere else," she whispered, grabbing her hand tightly. "It will be bad if we run into Gio." Their shadows slid across the floor, carrying with them unspoken secrets and mounting tension. And, at the other end of the corridor, Chae-gyul turned to Moon Gi-sung, his voice tense. "Did you lock Namgyo in?" Moon Gi-sung just shook his head, his gaze showing genuine denial. And again we return to the two girls. "This is no longer a joke," said one, her voice sounding serious. "I told you it wasn't me," the second one responded sharply, her voice trembling with indignation. Her friend tried to calm her down, but her irritation was stronger. "Oh God, enough already." Namgyo tried hard to defend her innocence, but there was a hint of nervousness in her words. The interlocutor, crossing her arms over her chest, merely chuckled, emphasizing the logic of her doubts. The conversation reached a dead end, and my friend, giving up, suggested changing the subject and going to the library. But Namgyo, peeking out from around the corner, smiled playfully, as if she was not at all offended by the accusations. From the outside, their strange relationship seemed incomprehensible, but no one dared interfere with this fragile dynamic. At the other end of the corridor, climbing the stairs, he was wondering who to confide his worries to first. A nurse came out of the medical room, telling the patient who remained inside to rest. It turned out to be Nam Geo, who, despite the blindfold, was smiling happily, enjoying the freedom from classes. However, soon her smile faded, and her eyelids grew heavy from the overwhelming, inexplicable fatigue. Her eyes slowly closed, plunging her into a semi-oblivion where reality mixed with images. In this oblivion, thoughts of her loved ones flashed through her mind about how she did not want to be an extra burden for them. Flashback, a gloomy night, a phone conversation, a worried voice complaining about her late walks. Another flashback, another health warning that sounded like a death sentence. Nanjio woke up abruptly, exhaling, and a new, determined purposefulness was visible in her eyes. She didn't want to burden anyone, knowing that even the hidden anxiety of her loved ones was weighing on her shoulders. Falling back into sleep, Namjio searched for answers in the depths of her subconscious. And there, among the images, Chajel appeared, his face calm and serene. Moon Gi-sung slept next to him, his presence adding a mystical touch to the picture. Under the cover of the starry sky, shrouded in shimmer, they seemed to be the guardians of her most secret dreams. But in reality, Cha Gyul stood silently by the bedside of the sleeping Nam Gio, watching her sleep. In the depths of her consciousness, while her body was resting, something was already beginning to awaken, a vague, alarming premonition. But even in such moments, the image of Cha Gyul, captured by someone in a dream, continued to attract attention, becoming the object of other people's conversations. Behind his silent presence, the world around him was seething with whispers and bold phrases that painted his image with unexpected passion. Silent messages slid across the screens, capturing the courage of some and the playful rejection of others. But always, he was the focus. His name, spoken or written, became synonymous with attraction, a powerful, almost dangerous force that drew everyone. Far from the hustle and bustle of the world, in the quiet of the hospital room, Nam Gio continued her peaceful sleep, surrounded only by dim light. Her features were calm, as if untouched by the waves of anxiety that were about to overwhelm her mind. Suddenly, a vague image broke through her slumber, tearing her from the depths of peace, foreshadowing something dark. She found herself in an abyss, where only her lonely figure glowed with a ghostly light, and the world around was plunged into frightening darkness. The head turned slowly, catching something that was coming from this blackness, something that attracted and frightened at the same time. An unclear call or sound that broke through the thick veil of sleep, forcing her to peer into the void, trying to understand. Her feet, as if weightless, stood on invisible ground, ready to take a step into the unknown, driven by curiosity and fear. The anxiety grew, and questions silently formed in her mind. What was that sound? Where was it coming from, carrying a threat? A fight? Her thoughts raced. She heard only indistinct fragments, pushing her to get closer to solve this mystery. And then, in the next moment, a picture opened up before her that made everything inside her break off in a premonition of disaster. It was Che Gyul, and he was beating someone brutally, each blow echoing shrilly in the silence of her sleep. The victim of his wrath, defeated and bloodied, could barely utter a groan, drowning in pain, in complete helplessness. The sight was unbearable, and a desperate, burning desire to stop this madness arose within her. But instead of resisting, the beaten man merely bowed his head, expressing submission before his tormentor in silent recognition of strength. And at that very moment, gathering the last of his strength, he struck back, piercing the darkness with unexpected resistance, instantly changing the balance of power. The counterattack struck Chaejel, causing him to press his palm to his face as blood gushed out, painting the moment with a cruel reality. Namgio's gaze, full of anxiety, piercingly followed every detail of this sudden fight. Chagel, already bleeding, bowed his head, but his posture showed not pain, but gathering rage. The next second, he grabbed Moonji-sung by the collar with a jerk, unleashing his counter-aggression on him. Chajel's fist shot up, cutting through the air with a roar, ready to strike its target. But Namgil, without thinking, rushed forward to stop this madness, her eyes wide in shock. "Chajel!" her cry echoed, trying to reach his hardened heart as she grabbed him tightly. "What are you doing? Stop!" Namgio begged, trying to pull him away from Moon Ji-seong, her voice shaking with desperation. But Chagil pushed her away sharply. His anger was stronger than any obstacles, and she flew to the side. He looked at her. Her name, Gio, sounded like a cold sentence, full of disappointment and alienation. "You!" Chagil breathed out, his gaze sliding over her face before he turned away, drowning in his own dark thoughts. Suddenly, reality around Namgio swam, and she opened her eyes, emerging from a deep abyss of memories. Lying in a hospital room, Namgio tried to piece together the fragments of her memory. her mind clinging to the image of the boy with the scar. I'm so tired, she whispered, rubbing her eyes, while Moon Jisung was already quietly asking next to her if she had woken up. Weak and exhausted, Nam Jio sat up in bed, trying to comprehend where she was and what had happened to her. Moon Jisung sat next to him, his gaze filled with anticipation and an unspoken question. "Oh, there you are, Gaisong," Namgyo said, her voice still sounding tired, but already with a hint of relief. Later, Namgyo walked down the hallway with Moon Gi-sung on crutches, her impatience demanding answers. "Want to tell me what's going on?" She told about the pantry, about the locked door, about how she got out only in the morning, without revealing the whole truth about the horror she had experienced. "I have a feeling you're not telling me something." Moon Gi-sung didn't hide his suspicions, to which Namgyo merely shrugged, defiantly replying, "Okay, don't believe me." Without waiting for an answer, Moon Ji-sung resolutely reached out his hand to the door handle to move forward. Nam Jio followed him, but a sudden gust of wind or a sharp sound made her flinch, emitting a soft cry. Her hair flew through the air, and her gaze expressed pure bewilderment and slight panic. The empty corridor of the medical center seemed to conceal something invisible, creating a sense of anxiety around. A sudden fright distorted Namgyo's face, causing her to overreact to what had happened. Noon Gaisong, noticing her condition, hastened to hug the girl, his face expressing sincere concern. His eyes were filled with a mixture of alarm and slight embarrassment at such close contact. He held her tightly, trying to calm her down, feeling her tremble as she came to her senses. Namgyo tilted her head back and looked at him, while his cheeks flushed slightly in surprise. Moon Ji-sung felt an internal discomfort as he understood the ambiguity of the moment. There was a look of shock in her eyes, as if she had just woken up from a nightmare. Suddenly, Nam Jio violently pushed him away, shouting words of disgust and demands that he move away. She didn't hide her irritation, but through her anger slipped a quick, reluctant "thank you" for catching her, and Moon Ji-sung tried to understand the reason for her outburst. Her list of complaints was long, but the name Yo Unsu sounded especially clear, almost like an accusation. The name, like an echo, stuck in Moon Gi-sung's thoughts, causing misunderstanding and suspicion. Meanwhile, the door to the medical office swung open, heralding a new development. Jagyul walked inside, looking around for something, his voice filled with worry as he called out to Nam Jio. His gaze instantly found her, and his face reflected surprise at what he saw. Nam Jio looked back at him and whispered the name Unsu in response, as if asking about something long forgotten. And in Chajel's eyes, framed by dark eyebrows, one could read a cold, penetrating gaze, full of unspoken thoughts. But before these words could be finished, a sharp voice rang out, full of concern for Gio, accusing the still invisible figure of causing harm. Moon Gi-sung peeked out from behind a curtain that hid the hospital bed, his face expressing annoyance, and his words sounded like excuses urging him not to divulge the secret. He pulled back the curtain, revealing a sleeping Nam Jio, and his voice was filled with indignation at the unfair suspicions, as if he was trying to prove his complete innocence. Moon Gi-sung turned to the girl and asked with doubt in his voice, suggesting that her visit was not motivated by genuine concern for her friend. Moon Gi-sung's gaze pierced her as he asked her point-blank if she was truly worried about Jio, questioning her entire motives. The girl's face flushed, her eyes widened in shock, and a confused, almost inaudible question, full of embarrassment, burst from her lips. Moon Gi-sung continued to stare at her, his silence oppressive, and then he repeated his question, demanding an honest answer that never came. In response to his persistence, a furious cry of "Leave me alone" echoed throughout the hospital room, accompanied by a deafening sound, as if something had broken. The door slammed shut, leaving Moon Ji-sung alone, his gaze following the girl's rapidly disappearing figure. Beads of sweat appeared on Moon Gi-sung's face, his shoulders tensed, and his expression betrayed his obvious shock at what had happened. Later, he found Namgyo leaning on crutches and began a cautious, almost whispered, hypothetical conversation about what might have been. Namgyo listened intently as Moon Ji-sung spoke about the possibility of communicating with Unsu, his question hanging in the air, waiting for her reaction. But Jio cut him off abruptly, calling it nonsense, her tone full of disbelief, and Moon Ji-sung only timidly defended himself by saying that it was just a question. She continued walking up the stairs without turning around, wondering if there were any rumors that might hint at Unsu's desire to restore their relationship. With a slight but dismissive smile, Nam Jio dismissed the idea, saying that she couldn't even imagine such a turn of events. Moon Ji-sung watched her, his gaze thoughtful, as if he was trying to find a hidden meaning in her words or the reason for her categoricalness. Suddenly, his eyes widened and a blush appeared on his face, as if some thought, like lightning, pierced his consciousness. He muttered something incoherently under his breath until Gio, noticing his strange behavior, demanded to know what he was muttering. Nam Gio turned around and confidently stated that Unsu had always been the source of their problems, showing open hostility towards her. And so, Moon Ji-sung was left alone, hunched over on the steps, his head down and his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of all those unspoken emotions had fallen upon him. But as soon as I looked away from his suffering, recent events flashed in my memory. A shocked cry of "What?" was heard from the dojo. Words of disbelief and surprise hung in the air as one of the students couldn't believe what he was hearing, asking, "That can't be true. Are you serious?" The other, hunched over on the tatami, only trembled silently, repeating to himself, "It can't be," trying to comprehend the crushing truth. It was Moon Jae-sung, his gaze full of resigned melancholy, as if he had already accepted the inevitable, but his heart was breaking with pain. The symbol of his path, the black belt, was tightly wrapped around his waist, a reminder of the unwavering discipline that now seemed pointless. And while he was sinking into despair, voices full of sympathy were heard from the outside, calling him cutie, for whom his heart ached. These voices whispered about the fate of the third wheel, predicting his inevitable loneliness in this complex drama. The audience, absorbed in the story, argued and worried, hoping that he would find his own happiness, because even in clichés there must be exceptions. Meanwhile, time passed, and the action moved to the impressive building of the Gogol University Hospital, where a new chapter began. The desk calendar counted down the days of May, symbolizing the leisurely flow of life and the healing process of not only physical but also emotional wounds. In the doctor's office, one of the heroines, whose leg was in a cast, expressed impatience and a burning desire to simply put herself in order. Her irritation grew from the monotonous answers, which boiled down to just one thing: "You have to wait," while the doctor closely watched her reaction. He, clearly suspecting that she was again neglecting her rest, asked directly if she was going on active walks or training, as she had done before. After a hasty denial, the doctor asked again, his gaze penetrating, trying to guess her true intentions. With a hint of surprise in his voice, the doctor announced that the cast could be removed as early as next week if her condition stabilized, and hope lit up her eyes. She reacted to this news with overwhelming joy, and the doctor, smiling, reminded her of her youth and impatience, which was difficult to hide. He praised her, saying that if her condition was stable, a splint could soon be applied, emphasizing her progress and recovery. Despite her genuine joy and frequent nods, the doctor sternly warned her that this did not give her the right to run, urging her to exercise utmost caution. Happy, but still on crutches, she said goodbye to the doctor, promising to be careful and looking forward to the next appointment. And the doctor, watching her leave, only laughed quietly, noting her indomitable energy and thirst for life, which could not be contained. An oasis of peace stretched above the city, hidden from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, where the healing rays of the sun caressed the green expanses. Here, far from the bustle of the hospital, Nam Gio sat on a bench, leaning on her crutches, quietly contemplating her still injured leg. She admitted to herself that she hated hospitals, but those moments afterwards, walking in the fresh air, were true bliss, a rare opportunity to relax. However, the peace was short-lived. A tall figure appeared behind her, carrying a barely visible tin can in his hand. There was a sudden light knock, and a cold tin can appeared out of nowhere on her head, causing the girl to flinch in surprise. Fear gripped her as she turned around sharply, and only one thing flashed through her mind. Who is it? Moon Ji-sung stood before her, his gaze full of mischief and a slight teasing smile playing on his lips. Her confusion gave way to barely suppressed irritation. Why did they keep bumping into each other? Was he really following her? Moon Gi-sung merely chuckled in response, his laughter a teasing riddle. In that brief but profound moment, his smile was both an answer and a new question, confirming his relaxed yet enigmatic nature. He sat down casually next to her, and Namgyo suddenly realized that she had never seen him dressed so casually before, as he asked her to give him the can for a second. She handed him the jar, her gaze expressing slight bewilderment and renewed confusion. With a characteristic pishgaik, the aluminum lid gave way, revealing the contents of the can. Moongi-san apologized and took a few sips, offering her the rest, to which Namgyo only nodded, remembering that he had, in fact, bought her. He threw his head back and took several long sips, as if quenching not only his thirst but also some inner need. Her gaze lingered on him, taking in every detail, as if trying to unravel the mystery hidden behind his casual manner. He wiped his mouth and turned to her, asking if she liked the drink, then handed the can back. Namgyo raised the can to her lips, taking her own sip, now sharing the moment with him. Moon Gi-sung explained that his grandmother was the reason for his visit, and she immediately asked if she was okay, and then asked why Nam-jio was there. She confirmed that, yes, her leg was the reason for the visit, and then, unable to contain her joy, announced that the cast would be removed the following week. Moon Gi-sung looked at her, his face lit up with a genuine smile, and he said, "That's good," sharing her joy. A thoughtful silence hung between them, broken only by the light rustling of the leaves. Nam Jio seemed to be lost in her thoughts. Her gaze became distant. Moon Jisung coughed, as if trying to break the growing tension. In Nam Jio's hands, the can of drink seemed like the only support at that moment. Moon Gi-sung said thoughtfully that she seemed too calm for her age, and he could only guess what she was thinking. Her eyes met his, a silent invitation to open up. However, the conversation took a different turn when Moon Gi-sung suddenly said, "My grandmother." Nam Jio raised an eyebrow in surprise, and Moon Ji-sung continued, explaining that his grandmother had been hospitalized due to angina. "She is no one but me," his voice sounded serious. "That's why I'm here." Nam Jio covered her mouth, realizing she had accidentally spoken her mind, and Moon Ji-sung just chuckled. "You're always interested in this kind of thing, so you can ask directly." Nam Jio was embarrassed, explaining that she simply didn't expect such frankness from him, since he rarely shares such things. Moon Gi-sung looked at her with a soft smile, offering to continue the story if she was interested. "Are we a little closer?" Nam Jio asked, as if trying to define the boundaries of their new intimacy. She recalled how last time he refused to share, citing the lack of special closeness between them. Moon Ji-sung just raised an eyebrow in surprise, as if recalling their previous conversation. And now, as they walked side by side, Nam Jio dared to ask, "What if we get closer?" Her gaze was full of hope, anticipating possible changes. Moon Gi-sung turned around and a slight smile appeared on his face. "Maybe," he replied. "Perhaps," Nam Jio whispered as they settled back onto the bench. Moon Ji-sung lightly covered his mouth with his hand, as if collecting his thoughts or looking away in embarrassment. Moon Ji-sung closed his mouth thoughtfully, as if he was thinking about something serious, perhaps too serious. Nam Jio held a can of drink, and next to her, on the bench, Moon Ji-sung's hand trembled slightly. Slowly, almost hesitantly, his fingers reached out to her. A tender look, full of hidden emotions, slid across her face. And so, their palms met, intertwined in a silent promise that only the two of them could feel. He leaned toward her, his quiet question sounding more in the air than in words. His eyes reflected a deep, yet soft, almost childish sincerity. Nam Jio blushed, her cheeks burning, revealing all her embarrassment. Chagul's voice suddenly broke the silence, as if reminding him of something that had just begun and needed to be continued. Moon Gi-sung pulled her close, hugging her as Nam Jio tried to cope with the overwhelming feelings, as if protecting her from the whole world. His eyes were closed. A light, almost weightless smile played on his lips. A moment of complete peace. Nam Jio sighed, gathering her courage, and moved decisively closer, accidentally touching his ear. Their embrace was tight, and the air around them trembled with an invisible sound, as if something had disturbed their perfect privacy. Moon Gi-sung flinched sharply, his hand instinctively covering his ear, causing Nam Jio to instantly become alarmed. There was genuine concern and a twinge of guilt in her eyes. But Moon Ji-sung only touched her reassuringly, as if to say, "It's okay." And, smiling, he assured that there was no pain, only the warmth of her presence. Her gaze involuntarily stopped on the silver jewelry in his ear, which she had so awkwardly touched. Moon Gi-sung touched the piercing quietly, inviting her to take a closer look, as if demonstrating his imperviousness to pain. His deep gaze conveyed not only calm confidence, but also something that promised new, unexplored depths in their relationship. Jagil's lonely figure stood frozen on the bench, lost in his own thoughts, far from the bustle of the world. But sometimes, even the strongest confidence cracks when an image pops up on your phone screen that reminds you of forbidden feelings. Or when the tangle of unresolved questions becomes so tangled that even the simplest answers seem unattainable. On the playground, where life was usually full of carefree laughter, today there was a different, tense atmosphere. Amidst the ringing voices, a question suddenly sounded, like an echo of the past, tearing someone out of their lingering thoughts. "Will girl come today?" Jae-jel, already sitting on the steps of the play structure, looked exhausted, his gaze fixed on emptiness. He jerked back as someone's name sounded too close, and a dangerous fire flashed in his eyes. "Did you have a fight with him?" A friend's voice was heard, but Cha-gyul only waved it off irritably. The tension was rising. His friends tried to reason with him, but Cha-gyul's anger was like a wave, ready to cover everything around. "I don't care," he said, trying to hide his true pain behind a feigned indifference. But something in the air changed. Some invisible force riveted his gaze to one point, and anger gave way to wariness. Moon Ji-sung's steps were quiet and cautious, as if he was afraid to disturb the fragile peace of this place. One of the boys whispered, pointing at the new arrival, and his name hung in the air, full of unspoken meanings. All eyes turned to Moon Gi-sung when he finally appeared on the playground. His presence felt like an electric shock. Moon Gi-sung greeted Cha Gyul with a barely noticeable smile, as if there were no disagreements or secrets between them. But an expression flashed across Kugul's face that made it clear that for him, this moment was far from a friendly meeting. Other guys gathered around, and the atmosphere became increasingly hostile, as if a new round of confrontation was being prepared. One of them, with his arm bandaged, directly accused Moon Gi-sung of hiding behind Cha Gyul's back, emphasizing his dependence. Moon Ji-sung turned pale, sharply denying any connection, his words sounding like a desperate attempt to distance himself, to defend himself. But the other guy had no intention of stopping, and his raised hand hung menacingly in the air until someone intervened. Chejel, appearing out of nowhere, grabbed the aggressor's hand, demanding that he leave. His gaze, firm and unyielding, left no doubt about the seriousness of his intentions. Moon Gi-sung, taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, watched the scene with anxious hope. Cha Gyul, sitting casually on the platform, gestured to one of the guys to come over to him. The steps, at first hesitant, then began to approach, obeying an unspoken order. A tense silence hung between them, only occasionally broken by timid agreement. Che Gyul asked his question, piercing and direct, but the answer was only a helpless admission of ignorance. Moon Gi-sung, thrown into the center of this whirlwind, looked completely confused, trying to comprehend what was happening. Cha Gyul thought for a moment, his gesture betraying deep thought, an attempt to find hidden motives. His eyes reflected weariness from human stupidity and misunderstanding. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a girl was moving slowly and with difficulty. Every movement was given to her with effort, supported only by the steel supports of the crutches. Namgyo felt with annoyance how this unfortunate bandage only worsened the already difficult situation. A sudden, booming laugh, coming from somewhere, made her shudder, disturbing the fragile peace. Irritated by the noise, Namgyo stopped, trying to understand the reason for this unexpected commotion. Her gaze, sliding along the street, suddenly came across familiar figures. Moon Gi-sung, who noticed her first, said her name as if waking up from a stupor. His face was distorted by a shadow of embarrassment, the awkwardness of being caught red-handed. He turned around, his gaze full of confusion, as if he didn't want her to be seen there. But Namgyo had already understood everything, and her angry call, imperious and unyielding, sounded like a sentence. Shock ran across the boys' faces, and Moon Ji-sung seemed completely crushed. He rushed towards her, forgetting about everything that could stop him. Moon Ji-sung desperately tried to make her leave, his words filled with panic and despair. But Namgyo did not back down, and his worried question hung in the air. In response, she merely hit him with her crutch, reminding him who was in charge. Her gaze fell on his wounded hand, and she asked the question he couldn't escape. Moon Gi-sung tried to stop her, but Namgyo was already closely studying the stranger on the stairs. She scolded them both without hesitation, telling Moon Gi-sung to go home and Che Gi-lu to go to school. But her words were just an attempt to hide her confusion about what was happening. And Chejel, silent and motionless, watched this scene from above. His gaze slid down and he began to mumble something incoherently. Namgyo looked up, her gaze lingering on him. She looked at him, trying to understand who this mysterious stranger was. Her gaze caught the wrinkled, dirty shirt that stood out against the background of his image. Then she saw the scar on his cheek, evidence of past battles. And suddenly, a wave of horror washed over her, memories flooding back mercilessly. Images of cruelty and violence flashed before my eyes. A face distorted with pain, blood on the lips, a picture of unbearable suffering. Moon Gi-sung, sensing her sudden change, looked at her back with concern. Her hand clutched his sleeve like an anchor, preventing her from drowning in the abyss of the past. Moon Gi-sung, unaware of the depth of her sudden stupor, only smiled shyly, feeling the tenderness of the moment. But for Che Gyul, the sound of the closing door became a harbinger of long-forgotten nightmares. In his dimmed pupil, as in a distorted mirror, the small, frightening reflection of Namgyo was frozen again. And here he was again standing at the same door, behind which lay her lifeless, fragile silhouette. In the gym, among dusty balls and gymnastics equipment, she slept, covered with his jacket. Memories came flooding back, enveloping me with a familiar feeling of helplessness and guilt. Returning to reality, Cha Gyul only forced a forced smile, trying to brush off the ghosts of the past by calling Namgyo his sister. The scene changes, and Moon Gi-sung is already offering to walk Nam Geo home, unaware of how deeply he is becoming entangled in her destiny. Cha Gul, with mockery and pain in his voice, lets them go, knowing that he cannot change the inevitable. Moon Gi-sung seemed to sense something. His gaze became more intense, more attentive. Nam Geo walked silently, immersed in her thoughts, into the very darkness that she was trying to hide. He walks beside her, not knowing what exactly is hidden behind her silence, behind this sudden detachment. And even when she asks him for money, there is more to this request than just need. "Can you go faster?" Namjo's words pierced Moon Ji-song like a sharp blade. Then he reached for her hand, trying to give her support with a gentle touch. Who is he? Namjo thinks as they pass by the very spot where they once encountered Cha Gyul. Moon Gi-sung doesn't understand her question, but she's seen him before, and for good reason. Their hands remain clasped, and her sudden, almost aggressive demand for money conceals a desperate attempt to return to familiar reality. "I saw him in my dream," she mutters quietly, and Moon Gi-sung doesn't understand why her gaze has changed so much. She looks away, but her eyes, filled with vague anxiety, betray the depth of her confusion and pain. Her thoughts are confused, remembering someone's angry, almost desperate cry. "Why the hell did you crawl here again? Get lost." Someone else seemed to respond with a smirk at these words, as if he had just unleashed a year's supply of curse words in one sentence. Even the management, usually so restrained, was surprised by such a torrent of abuse, noting that such things usually only happen to other translators. The whole situation enveloped her mind like a viscous fog, leaving behind only a vague, uncertain feeling. In a half-empty classroom, where bright daylight penetrated through wide windows, students dozed, tired from the burden of everyday life. Only one girl, with a bandaged leg and crutches that leaned forlornly against the wall, holds her head, trying to collect her broken thoughts. Everything came crashing down at once, collapsing like an avalanche, and she's desperately trying to figure out where to start, what to even sort out in this chaos. "Okay, so first," flashes through her mind, as if she's trying to snatch one thread from the tangle of problems to begin untangling it. She remembers a group of boys, and one of them, with cuts on his face, stands out from the rest, evoking vague images in her memory. His face, marked by scars and piercings, comes back to life, a silent testimony to the recent brutal battle. Or maybe she herself, the girl who appeared to her in her dreams, is also somehow connected with this mysterious Cha Gel. If so, then, the fight from her terrible dream, with all its bloody details, could really happen in reality, in this world. As for Chejel himself, his presence, his mystery, remain completely incomprehensible to her. She, looking into the void, admits to herself, she absolutely does not understand him, his motives, his gaze. Recently, his eyes, full of some hidden passion or threat, have not let her go, but what is really going on between them? And as if that weren't enough, the situation with Unsu also comes up, adding a new worry to the already long list of problems. "Why did she lock me in the closet?" she silently asks herself, remembering Nam Gio's malicious laughter and her caustic words. "Haha, I get it, so what?" Does Nam Gio really hate her that much, or is there something else hidden behind this apparent anger that the heroine herself doesn't dare admit? "Ugh, my little head," she moans, trying to stop the throbbing pain when suddenly, through the haze of her thoughts, she hears her name, Gio. A crowd of classmates surrounds her, and Nam Gio, casting aside her usual hostility, asks with real, genuine concern, "What's wrong? Do you have a headache?" She answers, trying to hide her confusion, that she was simply lost in thought, but there is something else in her eyes. Namgyo nods with feigned kindness, hinting that she knows some truth, while the others look at each other in bewilderment. A sly smile crosses her lips, foreshadowing something bad. "If I were you, I would have told you everything already," Namgyo continues, feigning understanding, and adds unctuously, "You are so kind, Gio," but the true subtext of these words is chilling. Bewilderment grows like a fog, clouding her thoughts. She has absolutely no idea what is being discussed. "What are you talking about?" she asks, feeling invisible threads of intrigue begin to tighten around her, and in response there is only an ominous, "What can we talk about?" The voices around her mingle in a single chorus. "Everyone already knows, you don't have to hide it," and words about some unpleasant situation fall on her like a cold shower. "An unpleasant situation? With me?" Her inner voice sounds confused, trying to find at least some clue in the maelstrom of events. Gio says meaningfully to us, "Well, yes, recently," and a sudden cry from someone in the crowd draws all eyes to the door. And there she is, that same girl, calmly walking into the classroom, holding a drink in her hands, completely unaware of the tension that hangs in the air. Her concentrated look as she takes a bite betrays no emotion, but the atmosphere around her thickens. In the back of the classroom, under the watchful eyes, that same girl remains standing while the one who initially felt ill still hasn't recovered. The invisible word dispute hangs over the class, and everyone, as if on command, turns their gaze to the newcomer. Just look at this shameless woman, Namgyo whispers, her words spreading like poison among her classmates. The girl entering feels the oppressive atmosphere, trying to understand what is happening, while behind her back they whisper, "Does she even have a conscience?" Suddenly, Namgyo lashes out at her. "Go eat somewhere else! The classroom stinks now!" And her voice echoes through the silence. But the one who is being accused just continues to eat silently, without looking up from her food, although a slight grimace betrays her internal struggle. A barely noticeable trembling of her lips. And now a shadow of pain slides across her face, revealing the full depth of her unspoken suffering. With a heavy sigh, she stands up and, ignoring the puzzled looks and the question, "What is it?" slowly heads towards the exit. Her hand, squeezing, presses against the window frame, as if trying to find support in this hostile world. The tension in the air becomes unbearable until one of the girls, unable to bear it any longer, suddenly opens the window, letting in the cold street air. Her voice is sharp, like a blade aimed at those she believes have provoked this conflict. Anger and despair mingle on her face as she clutches the wrapper in her fist, preparing to throw it away. The trash lands in the bin with a dull thud, like the last burst of her suppressed emotions as she tries to pull herself together. Suddenly, Chagel appears, his words sounding like an attempt to protect the girl, but behind this protection there is something more than just friendly support. A shadow of doubt flickers in her eyes as she meets his, trying to understand the true motive for his intervention. Chagel, without saying a word, casts a quick glance and invites her to come out, as if offering refuge from the growing storm of gossip. They lead the class, leaving behind a trail of bewilderment and hidden questions in the backs of the remaining students. Whispers and surprised looks follow them. What's going on? Why is he with her when Moon Gi-sung and Namgyo are here? One of the girls turns to Nam Jio, offering consolation that only seems to highlight her own confusion. But Nam Jio seems completely confused, trying to understand why everyone is attacking Unsu and what the hell is going on. However, other students are quick to confirm that they know about the incident, and their voices are full of condemnation. The weight of the accusations weighs heavily on the air. Yuen Su locked a traumatized person in a closet? This is beyond all bounds. Sympathy for the victim is mixed with shock at the cruelty. Can envy really lead to such brutality? Nam Jio, whose face reflects confusion, slowly begins to realize the true scale of the nightmare that has occurred. Suddenly, like a gust of wind, Unsu bursts back into the classroom, her movements full of determination and anger. Caught off guard, the students fall silent, staring at her with their mouths open, not daring to move. She stops right above one of the girls, and the tension in the room becomes almost palpable, deadly. Her voice rings with accusations, pointing to the only culprit, in her opinion, of these vile rumors. "I didn't do anything," she counters, but her tone betrays not only denial but also irritation at this escalating drama. Hiri, hearing her name in the whirlwind of accusations, freezes in shock. Meanwhile, one of Namgyo's friends seemed to be enjoying the escalating drama. Without missing a beat, someone from the crowd taunted Hiri, "What's with all this show-off in front of Gio?" Namgyo's friend nodded with an approving grin, catching up with her rival's wave of humiliation. But suddenly, the direction of the accusations changed, and a voice from the side asked Namgyo, "Hey, Gio, if it's not Haiyun, then aren't you the one spreading them?" Hiri, stunned by this turn of events, finally found her voice, casting a look of rage at Namgyo. But Namgyo only raised her head, demanding an immediate answer from Hiri. Off to the side, by the lockers, Chaegyul watched silently, thoughtfully noting their similarity. Anger was building, and Harry couldn't understand why her untruth was being so persistently challenged. Namjo, as if playing with her victim, only smiled mockingly. Hiri was stunned, unable to believe what was happening. Namgyo continued her onslaught, bringing up old grievances and accusing Hiri of having a habit of bothering her. "Shut up, Namgyo," Hiri shouted, but her words stuck in her throat as her opponent refused to budge. Hiri, gathering her remaining strength, challenged, "I won't die of cold as you hope." The two girls stood face to face, their gazes locked in a silent but furious confrontation. "Say it again," Hiri demanded, her voice dangerously low. Namgyo only smirked in response, as if teasing her victim. Suddenly, Hiri stepped forward sharply, grabbing Namgyo by the shoulder. But Namgyo was quicker, pushing Hiri right onto the desk. Namjo looked down at the fallen Hiri, her voice a caustic mixture of surprise and triumph. Hyri, who had fallen onto her desk, tried to wave it off, her voice seeming to be drowned out by confusion. But Namgyo was no longer just furious. She was seething, furiously pushing her opponent. The blow landed on Harry's head, and she winced in sudden, sharp pain. The next moment, Namgyo herself froze in shock, realizing what she had done. Suddenly, the narrative breaks, and we see a fragment of someone's chat, promising to see something important. The response is a vague confirmation, full of doubt and confusion, as if trying to discern something invisible. The feeling of someone's gaze pierces the screen, as if invisible eyes are watching what is happening. A vague feeling of misunderstanding, like someone asking in confusion, "I'm not sure," remains hanging in the air. And so we return to the office again, where the teacher's booming voice shakes the walls, scolding us for a thoughtless fight. In front of him stand both girls. Namgyo is dejected, and Hyri, leaning on crutches, looks rumpled. A grimace of rejection, mixed with offended dignity, froze on Harry's face. Namgyo listened to the stream of accusations in silence, without looking up, her posture indicating complete depression. With a menacing intonation, the teacher demanded an answer, who, in the end, provoked the conflict. He couldn't believe that their pride and joy, the athletes, were capable of such a wild swing of their fists, threatening to expel them from the team. Addressing Hyri by name, he reminded her of the long line of upcoming competitions that were now in jeopardy. The teacher pointed reproachfully at Hyri, whose anger caused her to swing at the man with the injured leg. At this moment, Namgyo finally raised her head, her face expressing deep regret and self-condemnation. She tried to force the words out, but they stuck on her tongue, turning into a silent moan. Both girls stood with their heads bowed, awaiting the verdict, their backs revealing the heavy burden of guilt. Hyri, stealing a glance at Namgyo, seemed to see in her the root of all her troubles. Her face was distorted in a grimace of resentment, and in her eyes one could see a mixture of anger and fear of the inevitable punishment. But Harry, sharply raising her head, suddenly declared in a breaking voice that it was she who was the instigator of this whole unpleasant story. Namgyo, not allowing such self-sacrifice, immediately objected, insisting that it was she who pushed first. The girls argued, shifting the blame onto themselves, until Namgyo admitted that she had struck first. The teacher, addressing Namgyo, sternly reminded her of her position as a gifted student and the possible consequences of such confessions. But Hyri, overcome with panic, continued to shout out confessions, stumbling over her words about spreading rumors. Her words, incoherent and confused, did not fit into any reasonable framework. It was as if an invisible hand had erased all sound, leaving only a hollow echo of anxiety beneath the silent ceiling lights. Eventually, the heated argument gave way to an oppressive silence as both girls were seated at the table to write explanatory notes. A white sheet of paper lay before them, demanding that they pour out the bitter truth of events onto it. Namgyo, not knowing where to start, looked up at Hyri helplessly, trying to find some kind of clue. Hyri, bent over her sheet of paper intently, seemed immersed in her own dark thoughts. "Where will you start?" Namgyo asked, and Hyri replied, "The storage room? Should I write down everything I know?" "Go ahead," came the reply. Namgyo raised her eyebrows in surprise, not expecting such a willingness to reveal all her cards. And Namgyo started writing about how Hyri locked her in the closet, which caused an immediate angry outcry. "But you yourself gave me permission to write whatever I deemed necessary," Namgyo retorted, insisting on her truth. "What nonsense! I didn't do it!" Hyri flared up, her voice shaking with indignation. "I'll write what I heard? How else?" Namgyo answered calmly, only further provoking her opponent. The atmosphere grew thicker, and only the rustle of pens on paper broke the silent war of two souls, each fighting for its own version of reality. And in that tense silence, looking at the written lines, Namgyo wondered, what really happened, and why did everything turn out this way? But the abrupt "stop" on paper seemed to call into question the very possibility of finding the truth, interrupting the flow of thought. Chajel shuddered, her gaze sliding downwards, trying to hold on to the elusive thought that was tormenting her from within. She thought that it would be enough to simply remain silent to get away with punishment and close this chapter, but an inner voice abruptly interrupted her. "Shut up!" Like a game of chess where every move counts, she knew that if she managed to get away with it, it would only make the accusations against her worse. After all, the whole class had already passed its verdict, and they didn't even give her a chance to justify herself. They didn't allow her to say, "It wasn't me." Namgyo seemed to read her thoughts, calmly noting that, although she didn't know whether Chagyul was truly guilty, such behavior revealed a deep sense of guilt. With an ironic smile, Namgyo suggested calling Park Hyun, who, in her opinion, knew all the details, immediately noting that after revealing Cha Gyul's true nature, there was no point in expecting support from her. Her bold look and the pen she clutched in her hand seemed to say, "Hit me if you have the guts." It was a direct challenge. And this challenge was heard, and rage, like a flame, flared up in Chaejel's eyes, turning her into an enraged beast. With a dull thud, something flew towards Namgyo, who only chuckled, enjoying this violent reaction. At this time, Moon Gisung stood outside the door, as if caught in a trap, his shoulders drooping and his gaze full of unspoken sadness. He heard a noise from the office and, startled, turned around when Chajil suddenly flew out of the room, almost running into him. Moon Gisung froze, his face expressing a mixture of anxiety and sadness, as if he already knew what was happening. Chajel, without even deigning to look at him, walked past, clenching her jaw, her face still distorted by a grimace of anger. She just turned her head away sharply, making a short, contemptuous sound, as if waving away the whole world. While Chagyul was leaving, Namgyo, leaning on her crutches, saw Moon Gi-sung and quietly called out his name, surprised by his presence. Moon Gi-sung looked up, and his usually serious face lit up with a rare, almost hesitant smile. "Gio, what are you doing here? Were you waiting for me?" Her voice was tinged with curiosity, to which he responded only with a guilty sigh. Sorry. He looked down, admitting that due to training and competitions he had completely forgotten about her, paying so little attention to her. Namgyo listened attentively, her usually cheerful face now expressing genuine surprise mixed with slight concern. Namgyo couldn't understand why he felt guilty for something that was beyond her control. Moon Ji-sung looked up in surprise, his mind trying to process what he had just heard. "It's weird," she whispered, trying to contain her embarrassment. "It's not your fault, Moon Ji-sung, not at all." At that moment, something snapped in Chaegel, and his fist involuntarily clenched, reflecting the internal pain. Namgyo, through a strained smile, reminded him of the importance of the upcoming competition. "Lucky you," she breathed out, barely audibly. "You can devote yourself to sports, and nothing stands in your way." These words, spoken with such bitter sincerity, made Chajel freeze, his gaze clouded. Namgyo turned away, trying to hide her overwhelming feelings, and only urged him to return to training. The explanatory note was clutched in her hand, a silent testimony to her lost dream. "I'll go," she said quietly, turning and walking slowly away, each step echoing in the silence of the corridor. Her profile was full of sadness, and her gaze was directed into emptiness, as if she saw only her own destroyed world. But his hand, like an invisible thread, suddenly caught her by the sleeve, stopping the moment. "Gio," Moon Gi-sung said with a hint of desperation, "I need to tell you something." His face reflected deep anxiety. Every drop of sweat spoke of an unspoken heaviness. "Is it urgent?" Namgyo asked, her voice sounding tired but hopeful. He hesitated, his words stuck in his throat, but suggested calling closer to the evening to avoid prying eyes. Namgyo nodded, asking only one thing, to call as soon as he was home. Moon Gi-sung turned away, his gaze fixed on the distance, anticipating a long and arduous evening. "By then it will be night," he muttered quietly. "Call, everything is fine," Namgyo managed to say when they were interrupted by someone's hurried call, demanding her attention. "I really have to go," she said, her voice breaking before disappearing around the corner, but she turned back. "Call me." "Okay," he echoed, his gaze full of unspoken words as he followed her. The words full of hope and promise vanished into thin air as Cha Gyul slowly walked away, leaning on his crutches, leaving Moon Gi-sung, whose bandaged arm hung limply in the air. Moon Gi-sung looked down, trying to hold on to the fading image, his face expressing resignation and quiet pain. Meanwhile, the world around me continued to move, distracting me from pressing thoughts with small reminders that life does not stand still. But sometimes even the most important words seem like nothing more than background noise when the heart is filled with unspoken feelings. And even amidst this noise, deep in my soul there lived only one thought, uncertainty about the future, sharp as a splinter. Namgyo, lost in her thoughts, sat on an empty bus, every meter of which distanced her from what was left behind and brought her closer to the unknown. Her fingers slid across the phone screen, typing messages, full of hope that someone on the other end of the line would answer. "Are you free? Can we call? Are you busy? Is something wrong? Are you home yet?" The anxious questions echoed in the empty chat, finding no answer. Missed calls, hours of silence, and then, finally, a short, knife-like stab. "Sorry, I'm tired. Let's do it next time." Bitterness and resentment overwhelmed her as she, with difficulty containing her emotions, typed her angry reply. And suddenly, like a flash in my mind, there was his face, speaking words that made my heart clench. "Gio, I need to talk to you." His gaze, full of painful tenderness and guilt, foreshadowed something inevitable, but then she had no idea what it was. While Cha Gyul, as if sensing the approaching storm, only silently watched from the side, his thoughts hidden. Okay, he'll probably tell me later anyway, Namgyo consoled herself when the announcement of the Korean high school bus stop broke her out of her thoughts. Suddenly, at the next stop, someone entered the bus whose figure seemed painfully familiar to her. Namgyo looked up from her phone and froze, recognizing the person who had entered as someone she had not expected to see here at all. A moment later, a warm palm gently touched her cheek, bringing her out of her stupor. What the? She cried, recoiling from the unexpected touch, her heart pounding wildly in her chest from shock. Moon Jisung stood before her, his gaze clouded and his words seemed stuck in his throat. Their eyes met, and in that look there was so much unspoken, so many questions and answers, that the air around was filled with unbearable tension. The bus moved smoothly, taking them away from the awkwardness of the moment. Swaying, he carried them away, into the whirlpool of ordinary life where every step seemed easier than looking into the eyes. But the peace didn't last long. A familiar morning turned into an unexpected meeting with Cha Gyul, who seemed to be waiting for her, showering her with ridicule. Nam Gio couldn't understand where he was coming from and why he had decided to wait for her, since after their last meeting she had tried to avoid the bus at this time. Cha Gyul, with a sly smile, admitted that he patiently missed several buses, only to accidentally bump into her. The girl was confused by this persistence, not understanding the reasons and wondering about his strange attachment. "I just wanted to see you," was his answer, simple and sincere but so exciting. Namgyo reminded him that they could see each other more often if he didn't skip school, to which Cha Gyul only sighed melancholically, admitting to insomnia. Suddenly, the realization struck her. Did that mean he remembered their first meeting and had just been teasing her all this time, pretending to forget? Cha Gyul just chuckled maliciously, satisfied that he had made her embarrassed again, and this caused a storm of emotions within her. With a light clap, her hand touched his forearm, a gentle but firm reproach. The short gesture was full of unspoken irritation and sudden embarrassment. He, maintaining his teasing smile, merely stated that now she was also hitting him. Namgyo immediately rushed to justify herself, claiming that it was just a light poke, not a real blow. Chae-jel's gaze became more serious. He admitted that there was no physical pain, but there was something more in his eyes. And then, the next moment, his hand tightly grasped her palm, as if protecting her from an invisible threat or simply not wanting to let go. She muttered something unintelligible in embarrassment, trying to comprehend this sudden closeness, this unexpected gesture. Her hands intertwined and her heart sank with each beat, and an uncontrollable blush filled her cheeks. Fear gripped her. If she showed even a momentary desire to let go of his hand, he would disappear, just like he had in the closet, leaving her alone. To distract herself from these disturbing thoughts, Namgyo quickly changed the subject, mentioning the school punishment. Her words hung in the air, and the answer came unexpectedly. The punishment was for more than just a quarrel. Chae-jel leaned over, his gaze fixed on her injured leg. Her cheeks flushed as he gently touched her cheek, and she quickly assured him that everything was fine. Namgyo paused for a moment, trying to find the words to explain the whole truth. But memories of yesterday came flooding back with renewed vigor, distorting her features. Her eyes reflected not only the pain of the injury, but also deep inner anxiety. She recalled the terrifying moment when her leg twisted under the pressure of the stranger. A sharp jolt, a scream, and the ground disappeared from under my feet. The phone slipped from her hands, flying into the abyss of her despair. Panicked thoughts flashed through her head. The other one could finish her off, cause even more harm. But suddenly, something changed. She closed her eyes and waited for the blow, but it never came. The sound of footsteps faded, and Namgyo dared to assume that her offender had stopped. Opening her eyes, she saw an unusual sight. The attacker's face was distorted by something incomprehensible, as if she had seen a ghost. Returning to reality, Namgyo thoughtfully said that the girl's behavior was extremely suspicious. And then it dawned on her. Her gaze suddenly fell on Cha Gyel, and she asked a strange question. She pointed to her cheek, describing a sign that might help. Moon Gisong, who had been silent until now listened intently, his eyes widening in sudden realization. Namgyo continued, explaining that her meeting with Cha Gyul was not at all a coincidence. The girl revealed the secret that connected them even before they met in real life. She called herself a clairvoyant. Indeed, she dreamed of Cha Gyul's recent fight with the very guy she was so worried about. In her dream, that guy had punched Cha Gyul right in the eyebrow, causing it to bleed, and now that detail was haunting her. Namgyo admitted that she had never seen this man before, but the dream was so vivid that she was in real shock when she met him later in reality. Chagul agreed that it was indeed strange, but added that he had his own thoughts and asked Namgyo to listen. The girl seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown, admitting that she was tormented by a bad feeling because this guy, apparently, was connected with her brother. Chagul asked about his brother with concern, remembering how he saw them together a few days ago, and he didn't like it at all. Namgyo asked if they were talking about the blonde guy who had once taken her brother away, and asked if Chagyul knew him. Chagul explained that it seemed like this guy was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, falling victim to the violent nature of those guys. Namgyo realized that this must be what Moon Ji-song had seen, and with timid hope, she asked Chagyul to help her brother if he encountered something like this again. Chagyul touched his chin thoughtfully, considering the unexpected request, and his gaze became even more serious. But then a slight smile appeared on his face, and he confidently replied that, of course, he would help. Namgyo, who had not expected such quick and sincere support, felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Chagyul tried to calm her down, saying that what happened was probably just an unfortunate misunderstanding. Namgyo looked at him with wide eyes, as if trying to read his thoughts. Suddenly, Chagyul yawned, rubbing his face, and Namgyo remembered that he mentioned lack of sleep, attributing his fatigue to that. His gaze, directed somewhere into the distance, still betrayed a hidden thoughtfulness, despite his attempt to brush off the problem. And at that moment their eyes met, creating a fleeting but tangible connection between them. Namgyo whispered, as if asking herself if their paths had really crossed at this strange moment. The world froze, and the air sparkled with an unexpected, electrifying touch. But suddenly it was not a romantic kiss, but a sharp, deafening collision. Realization struck him like a shard of ice, clearing the fog of confusion. Namgyo looked at him, stunned, as he quickly pulled away, his fingers lightly brushing against her lips. His eyes were wide with horror, and the words of apology barely escaped his lips. Thoughts were racing through Chaegyul's head. He couldn't believe that his first kiss happened in such chaos. Namgyo, barely holding back her tears, felt the heat of shame and embarrassment burning her cheeks. Who could have foreseen such awkwardness, such an unexpected beginning? In the cramped, silent space of the bus, Chaegyul desperately tried to calm her down, but the shock was too strong, and Namgyo could hardly stop trembling. Her quiet, broken voice revealed the depth of her confusion, and the words hung in the air between them, unable to find a continuation. Their looks revealed so much that was unsaid, so many unanswered questions. But then Namgyo raised her head, and a shadow of the question that had been tormenting her for a long time flashed in her eyes. The awkwardness of the moment was mixed with something deeper that needed resolution. The events of the last few minutes had left her head in complete chaos, and clarity seemed unattainable. She tried to formulate her thoughts, but the words came with difficulty. What happened between them in that moment of madness? This closeness, which arose suddenly and was interrupted just as abruptly, left a mark on both of them. And, as if by a click, the scene changed, taking us back to the more familiar rhythm of everyday school life. Once again, the pre-dawn haze hangs over the schoolyard, where those who prefer early mornings have already gathered. For Namgyo, these climbs were a challenge, albeit a familiar one, and Chaegyul only silently watched the athletes. A slight smile played on his lips. This whole ritual was only for one purpose, for the sake of meeting her. Gio, in an effort to ease the awkwardness, suggested not to wait for her any longer, as her schedule was so fickle. Her gaze betrayed embarrassment, because, as a newcomer to these games, she was afraid of seeming too intrusive. But Chaegyul, as if cuttingly, replied that he had not intended to, and that this day was the last, which struck her to the depths of her soul. However, immediately, as if correcting his tone, he suggested a much more practical solution: simply arrange a meeting. Why had she never asked for his number? He'd been waiting for her to take that step. Her cheeks flushed and her eyes widened at the unexpected revelation, so direct and bold. In an awkward silence, broken only by the creaking of crutches and the rustle of footsteps, a quiet "okay" sounded, and they continued on their way, slowly disappearing into the distance, leaving behind only the echo of words still unspoken. Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced the morning air, calling Gio's name. It was Moon Gisung who was rapidly approaching them, disturbing their secluded morning. He looked a little worried, his gaze downwards as if he were weighing every word. Cha Jel, with imperturbable calm, assessed the new guest, his face not betraying a single emotion. Gizian, not understanding their dialogue, asked what they were doing, and Chejel only asked them to wait a second. Then, without further ado, he held out his phone, offering to exchange contacts. A slight smile appeared on Chejel's face again when he saw that the number had been saved successfully. They moved forward again, but now the three of them, and Chae-jel, pleased with the result, walked a little behind. Moon Gi-sung's curiosity was great. How do you know each other? And Geo hastened to explain that this was the same Cha Gyul she had told him about. Nam Geo recalled her last meeting with Cha Gyul, trying to convince herself that her confusion was just a misunderstanding because he was with Seo. But deep inside, hidden resentment still raged, clenching his fist from unspoken words. She was tired of being a detective in her own life, looking for answers where there shouldn't be any, and hearing nothing but excuses. At that moment, Moon Gi-sung appeared in front of her, his gaze filled with unusual anxiety. He froze, squeezing out only a surprised, "What?" as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Moon Gi-sung asked anxiously what was going on with Nam Geo lately, his voice trembling. She just looked at him, clutching the phone to herself as if this small object could protect her from questions. Nam Geo tried to dismiss his concerns, assuring him that nothing terrible had happened. But Moon Gi-sung did not back down, warning her of the consequences if she was seen near Cha Gyul, fearing for her status as a gifted student. A spark of annoyance flashed in her eyes, but she remained silent, accepting his words. Realizing the harshness of his tone, Moon Gi-sung quickly apologized, knowing he had crossed the line. But Geo was adamant, subtly hinting that it seemed like he was taking his own issues out on her. She coldly reminded her how yesterday he had kept her waiting for a call, promising to tell her something, but in the end, he had ignored all the messages. He hesitated, breaking out in a cold sweat, the words stuck in his throat. Yesterday, he managed to squeeze out, trying to find at least some kind of explanation. Her gaze was intense as he finally explained that yesterday was not the right time for such a serious conversation. Moon Gi-sung took a deep breath, apologizing sincerely if it looked like he was taking it out on her. Namgyeo's voice softened, and she asked with genuine concern if something serious had really happened to him. Moon Gi-sung turned away, trying to hide his vulnerability, claiming that he was simply taking a trivial matter too seriously, that it was nothing special. Namgyo just nodded, letting him know that he could trust her and that no matter what happened, everything would be okay. Moon Gi-sung finally voiced what was bothering him. He felt like Namgyo was drifting away, no longer spending time with him. But he immediately hastened to dismiss these words as if they were unimportant, just to avoid awkwardness. Namgyo playfully flicked him on the forehead, immediately refuting his words. "You were the one who dumped me, not the other way around." She cleverly changed the subject, asking about his leisure time now that Moon Gi-sung was on a break from training. But she immediately expressed slight dissatisfaction, because while everyone around her was busy training, she was left to her own devices. And suddenly, her eyes widened, illuminated by a sudden thought, to which Moon Gi-sung responded with a questioning look. She beckoned him towards her with a conspiratorial air, as if about to tell him a great secret. And at that very moment, Namgyo leaned over to whisper something in his ear, and Moon Gi-sung froze in surprise. A whisper slipped almost inaudibly into his ear, enveloping them in a small cloud of secrecy. She put her finger to her lips, calling for silence and secrecy. And then her face became serious, revealing that after the fracture she felt like she was on a knife edge, and every decision was difficult. Moon Gi-sung tried to remind her of her previous words, but Namgyo only smiled mysteriously, hinting at the fickleness of fate. A sudden call interrupted their conversation, and Namgyo looked at the phone screen in confusion. A short but intriguing message came from Cha-jel addressed to her. A mischievous smile blossomed on her lips, revealing hidden pleasure. "This is something new," she whispered, holding back a cheerful laugh, clearly pleased with this turn of events. Moon Gi-sung just watched her silently, his thoughts hidden behind a thoughtful expression. Finally, Namgyo, leaning on her crutches, announced that it was time for her to go, interrupting their conversation. A quiet sigh escaped his lips as she turned away. He lingered his gaze on her retreating figure as Namgyo, limping slightly, gradually disappeared from sight. Namgyo, lost in her own thoughts, didn't want to pressure Cha-gyul, offering him time and space to open up. Chae-jel, in turn, promised to wait as long as it took, his words sounding like a promise of loyalty. As she walked away, thoughts of possible misunderstandings flashed through his mind, which he hastened to dispel. And her sincere smile seemed to confirm that there were no barriers to friendship between them. From that moment on, he understood that she needed space, and he was willing to provide it. But even at a distance, in the digital world, Cha-gyul couldn't help but address her in a new way, in his own way, despite her slight resistance. His persistence quickly gave way to mild anxiety when the responses stopped and the messages went unread. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a completely different reality awaited, a world of dirty, abandoned public toilets. A stifling smell and unsanitary conditions hung in the air, promising a grueling cleaning. It was a whole battlefield of disgust and desolation stretching out before them. Nam Geo and her friend stood frozen in shock and disgust at the sight. Despite her disgust, her friend put on her gloves first, preparing for an unequal battle with the mud. "This is too much," Nam Geo whispered, but her friend merely advised her to sit down, sparing her injured leg. Confusion crossed Nam Geo's face, as she wasn't used to standing by when action was needed. But her friend was adamant, pointing to the cast and the impracticality of her help, insisting that she just sit. Nam Geo tried to object by mentioning the waterproof case, but her words were cut off by a cold phrase. "You know, I have a conscience," her friend said quietly, not wanting to see her in such a state. With slight reluctance, Nam Geo accepted these arguments and retreated, leaning against the sink. And so, the battle with dirt began, mold, age-old filth. All of this succumbed to her decisive movements. Nam Geo watched her, her face showing a mixture of feelings, gratitude, helplessness, and a slight twinge of guilt. A helpless girl with an injured leg looks questioningly at the one with the bucket, waiting for an answer to a disturbing question. But the one on the sidelines reveals her cards. Another witness, Park Hyun, pointed to her as the culprit. The cleaning lady's face is distorted by a grimace of rage. Her eyebrows meet at the bridge of her nose, betraying deep indignation. A sudden anger bursts out. She accuses her friend of lying, of betraying the secret they promised to keep. "Are you not friends anymore?" comes the question, full of bewilderment, followed by a sharp, peremptory answer. Trying to understand the reasons, "Is this why you had a fight?" she asks, trying to understand the roots of the discord. The cleaning lady's hesitant "no" only heightens the intrigue, leaving the real reason open. Her gaze wanders, trying to collect her thoughts. Her words get stuck somewhere on the verge of revelation. A heavy silence hangs in the air, filling the space between them with unspoken grievances and misunderstandings. In the empty space of the restroom, only the echo of a lonely question sounds, "Why?" The girl with the injured leg lowers her gaze, her posture revealing humility or perhaps even silent reproach. The hands clutching the bucket tremble, betraying an internal struggle, boiling emotions ready to burst out. Through clenched teeth, words burst forth, full of unexpected frankness. "I don't hate you." What she heard caused confusion. "Did I hear it wrong?" she asks, not believing her ears. A loud, desperate scream breaks the silence, repeating each word so that it reaches its destination. "I said I don't hate you." Only one eye, wide with shock, silently asks, "What?" In a fit of emotion, she abruptly lowers the ladle into the bucket, as if trying to drown out the internal storm. Turning away quickly, she heads for the exit, ignoring the confused call. The door swings open and she disappears through the threshold, casting one last pain-filled glance. A loud bang and the click of the lock put a bold end to this sudden, poignant confession. The heroine freezes near the washing machine, and Chaejal's confused voice sounds behind her, interrupting her thoughts. Her voice trembles as she finally admits that she has always behaved this way. It's incredibly stupid to feel this burning embarrassment and resentment. Memories take her back to the beginning of high school, to the banner, but in her head she only hears her own defeat. "I never beat you in middle school." She sits among the crowd of newcomers, still full of hope and ignorance, unaware of the fateful encounters. Here is Cha Gyul, unperturbed as always, and Moon Gi-sung, his gaze modestly downcast. And here is Nam Geo, her future rival, with long hair, already radiating extraordinary strength. Her classmates whisper behind her back, wondering why she, a taekwondo star, didn't enroll in a sports school. Nam Geo just covers her mouth with her hand, hiding her true feelings. Rumors about her evil character spread faster than words about her talent. But Nam Geo simply continues to move forward silently, ignoring the gossip. Inside, she is filled with a cry of despair and anger. We are now in the same school. Meanwhile, the internet is full of news about rising taekwondo star Nam Geo, who amazed everyone with her kick. Every performance of hers was a triumph, a precursor to Olympic gold, and everyone knew it. And even when she was in the same class, the heroine couldn't tear herself away from her photos. The browser tab remained open. Every day was filled with her invisible presence, her shadow, her challenge. And then one day a question rang out that turned everything upside down. "Do you weigh 52 kilograms?" Nam Geo challenged her with a smile, offering to lose weight so they could compete in the same category. She even encouraged her by hinting at a slight difference in height and the possibility of changing weight class. And then, at that moment, a thought flashed through the heroine's mind, full of hope and determination. Perhaps this really is real. But the reality of school life quickly brought her back to earth when Nam Geo's ringing voice called out to her. Nam Geo left the classroom carefree, leaving Moon Ji-sun alone in her thoughts. After all, for Nam Geo, the world was simple, full of smiles and light desires. And for Moon Ji-sung, even in the middle of the day, the impenetrable darkness of her inner torment came. Ghosts of the past flashed through my mind. Tough training sessions and caustic questions. Why would someone like you try so hard? She remembered the coach telling Cha Gyul, "In my eyes, she was the ideal." Words that once sounded like a blessing, but now sounded like a curse. Why did they spend so much effort on her if, as some believed, there was really nothing to teach her? But she continued to move forward, step by step, refining her movements under strict guidance. She was strong, determined, every blow was a challenge to fate. And then emptiness. The silence of a hospital corridor where all dreams end. Here it is, the price of her aspirations, a fragile body, bound with bandages. Nam Jio's unexpected visit pulled Moon Ji-sung out of her reverie, but her friend's words only brought her back to the past. Is this really our captain? Moon Gi-sung lay there, wounded not only physically but also mentally, hiding her pain behind her downcast eyes. Nam Jio's gaze was unusually serious, piercingly scrutinizing, as if she were seeing not an old friend, but a stranger. And then, in the half-light of her despair, Nam Jio's unexpected challenge came. Shall we have a sparring match? Moon Ji-sung tried to retreat, to find an excuse to avoid confronting the past, herself. But Nam Jio was adamant, her words carrying an unprecedented seriousness, demanding that this challenge be accepted. Moon Ji-sung allowed herself to smile for the first time in a long time, realizing that there was no escaping fate, and asked, "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" The friend gave in, offering a short fight, not knowing that this would give Moon Gi-sung a chance to be revived, and Moon Gi-sung responded with a decisive, "Okay." And so, in the silence after the decision was made, even the most ordinary box on the shelf seemed like a promise. Gimme happiness. Nam Jio, weakened and confined to her hospital bed, complained about the juice, but her companion, most likely Cha Gyul, insistently asked her to drink it to recover. Meanwhile, within the school walls, there was an atmosphere of omissions and rumors that, although not directly spread, clearly had some basis. The tension between the girls, frozen opposite each other, was almost palpable, as if unspoken grievances were about to burst out. Nam Jio admitted that she felt humiliated under her rival's haughty gaze, but she herself added fuel to the fire by deliberately irritating her. The realization of her own share of guilt pierced Nam Jio, causing her to freeze mid-sentence, her eyes betraying confusion. The other girl, her face flushed with embarrassment, covered her mouth, trying to contain the sudden surge of emotion. The conversation continued in messages, where an unexpected confession was made. The girl had acted out of envy, leaving the interlocutor completely perplexed. The answers that followed were dry and detached, trying to make the situation seem ordinary, but there was much more that was unspoken behind them. And judging by subsequent reports, this awkward confession ended with a hasty escape, as if releasing the accumulated tension at once. However, even after this, complete clarity about what was happening did not come, leaving only a tangle of unanswered questions. Meanwhile, the city was immersed in the evening haze. Bridges connected the banks, and the fates of the heroes, their past with the future. Nam Jio and Cha Gyul sat by the water like two lonely islands, their silhouettes reflected in the calm surface of the river. Moon Gi-sung appeared with a slight smile, noting that he was glad the conflict had been resolved, bringing a note of relief to the conversation. Nam Jio was still tormented by the question of who locked her in the closet, doubting that it was an accident, to which Cha Gyul only shrugged, regretting the undeserved accusation. Nam Jio's face reflected deep thought. She was trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, but the picture was still incomplete. But now, it has become clear that the culprit, having distanced herself from everyone, even from her best friend, has essentially condemned herself to isolation, as if she had declared a boycott on everyone. Nam Jio speculated that perhaps the time had come for reconciliation, although she herself was not sure of such a possibility, only leaving room for hope. Cha-Geul asked with concern about Nam Jio's leg and the progress of its recovery, to which the girl replied that she had already started physical therapy. But the reality was harsh. Her legs remained severely swollen, preventing her from moving without pain, which of course slowed down the process. And again they sat side by side, tired but united by a common hope for a better future, watching as dusk finally fell over the city. Moon Ji-sung, looking thoughtfully to the side, voiced the obvious truth. But Nam Jio, as if trying to dispel her dark thoughts, began to object without finishing her sentence. Silence hung between them, filled with unspoken words and a slight echo of their shared anxiety. Her gaze, directed somewhere into the distance, contained a hint of hidden sadness. Moon Ji-sung, however, seemed to be looking for answers in the evening lights of the big city that engulfed the horizon. Finally breaking the silence, he turned towards her cautiously, ready to touch on what was in the air. His question, full of delicacy, touched on what was most dear to Nam Geo. She responded with a smile, trying to hide her true feelings. But even in this gesture, there was a slight tension hidden beneath the outward calm. Geo told us about her concern for her grandmother and her desire to be active despite the restrictions. She celebrated the success of the operation, recalling with relief their shared concern that had once brought them together. Moon Gisong turned away slightly, perhaps feeling awkward at her frankness. Namgyo, noticing his reaction, tilted her head in surprise. But when he tried to understand the reason for her embarrassment, Namgyo, as if seized by a sudden impulse, quickly turned away. As the dusk deepened, he gently asked her to look at him, sensing that something had changed. She jumped up with a sudden jerk, trying to laugh off her embarrassment, but her flushed cheeks betrayed her true feelings. Awkwardly trying to escape the situation, Namgyo gave a short, cool down, and hurried away. She grumbled silently at his feigned naivety, feeling something new ignite inside her until his voice called out to her. Namgyo turned around, her voice slightly offended, expecting more teasing. But instead of answering, they simply stood side by side, their feet, one in bandages, the other in a sneaker, silently testifying to the path they had traveled and the uncertain future. Their shoes, like their destinies, seemed closely linked, reflecting the path they had traveled and the trials to come. The city around them froze, turning into the pre-sunset tones as the world around them became just a backdrop to their story. Namgyo landed on the bridge railing, the sound of her landing echoing through the evening air like a marker of a new moment. Her eyes widened in surprise, and a questioning sigh escaped her lips as she turned around. Moon Gisung stood so close that the space between them disappeared, and their eyes met in anticipation. There was tenderness in his eyes, a slight smile touched the corners of his lips, expressing deep understanding. But her gaze was full of anxiety, as if the world around her was pressing down, not giving her peace even at this moment. Moon Gisung, noticing her anxiety, whispered words of comfort, hoping that she would be able to let go of her worries. However, alas, Namgyo only shook her head, her legs swinging above the water, repeating the movement of her heart, unable to calm down. She admitted that her thoughts constantly returned to her sports career, to the desire to grow up quickly and help her mother. Moon Ji-sung listened, their eyes full of silent understanding, now sharing the burden of these difficult revelations. He closed his eyes, deep in thought, and then made a soft sound, as if weighing her every word. Namgyo, trying to change the subject, asked if he himself wasn't worried about his future, about how he would earn a living. Moon Ji-sun looked up at the sky, his face expressing slight bewilderment but without a trace of real alarm. He answered frivolously that he would somehow hold out. The main thing was not to die of hunger, and Namgyo, jokingly, but with a hint of doom, thought that it looked like she would have to support him too. Moon Gi-sung's laughter was genuine, melting the tension and filling the air with lightness. Namgyo looked at him, her face reflecting a complex mixture of tenderness and slight annoyance. Suddenly, as if having made an important decision, she spoke, her voice sounding confident against the backdrop of the city bustle. She leaned forward, closing the distance, and looked him in the eyes, preparing for something important. Moon Ji-sung met her gaze, attentive and a little surprised, anticipating what would happen next. Namgyo, as if gathering her courage, held her breath, her gaze becoming more determined. Moon Gi-sung waited, his lips curling into a small smile, anticipating her next move. "So," Namgyo began, her voice quieter than usual, but with a hint of impatience. "What should we do now?" she finished, and the question hung in the air like the shadow of Chejel, invisibly present between them. Namgyo just smiled, and Moon Ji-sung, as if reading her thoughts, cheekily suggested, "Maybe we should kiss?" "Pervert," she replied teasingly, hinting at their morning kiss, but there was a glint of laughter in her eyes. She playfully confirmed, "Yes, I am a pervert," challenging, "What do you mind?" and added, with feigned innocence, "What's wrong with kissing?" And their lips met again, a long, sweet kiss that spoke louder than words. Moon Ji-sung opened his eye and watched her reaction mischievously, enjoying the moment. And then came another and another, light touches that spread warmth across her cheeks. He pulled away, pleased, smiling and asking if she was satisfied with his punishment. But Namgyo wasn't going to let him go that easily, her hand pulling him closer by the neck with force. A chain of kisses rained down on him, not giving him time to come to his senses, each kiss like a heartbeat. He was disarmed, immersed in the whirlpool of her tenderness, losing control of reality. His hand on the railing tightened, trying to hold on to some kind of support in this dizzying whirlwind. What should I do? Flashed through his mind as he realized that his heart belonged entirely to her. Nam Gio, clinging to him, sensed his confusion, and her voice was full of tenderness. He looked up, his cheeks flushed, and his gaze spoke of an unspoken desire that drove him crazy. Her fingers intertwined gently with his, sealing their connection with a silent promise. "Pervert," she whispered, but her heart was beating a frantic rhythm, echoing his own. His voice, low and soulful, only confirmed what they both felt. They were perfect for each other. And in the light of the sunset, over the shimmering surface of the river, their lips once again intertwined in a kiss, deep and tender. For Namgyo, the world narrowed to this single moment, to the touches that burned the skin and the mind. Every movement, every breath in this dance of lips was a revelation, a promise of something more. Cha Gyul hugged her tightly, pressing her to himself, as if trying to protect this fragile moment from the whole world. But a sudden stab of pain, a light touch on his lip, tore him from the captivity of passion. Namgyo flinched, surprised by the sudden change in his mood, her own words caught in her throat. A bright flash from the bench where the phone had been left rudely intruded into their intimate world. A name flashed on the screen like a harbinger of trouble, Moon Gi-sung. And somewhere else, trapped in his own darkness, Moon Gi-sung clutched his phone, drowning out the alarming beeps. His eyes reflected deep melancholy, a pain that ate away at the soul and gave no peace. He fought with inner demons, voices that branded him, reminding him of the past, of his children, of what he had lost. Curled up on the cold floor, he was a shadow of his former self, surrounded only by shadows and memories. The barely audible whisper, lost in the silence of the room, was a plea for salvation, a hope for help. But there, on the embankment, Cha Gel and Nam Gio, unaware of each other's grief, once again found solace in each other's arms. As she looked at the flickering lights of the city, a new, unknown feeling was born in her soul. And this kiss was not just a touch of lips, it was an invitation to something deeper, more revealing. His unspoken desire, the urge to enter deeper, spoke more clearly than words, foreshadowing the complete fusion of their souls. Even the creators, as if caught up in the heat of passion, couldn't help but debate the limits of what's permissible, the ratings, and how far one can go. Uncertainty hung in the air, like a premonition of changes that were already knocking on the door of their lives, leaving the viewer in tense anticipation.